Hi, everybody. This is John Meadows. Just joking, but that's your lead-in, so I figured I would steal it.
All right.
This is Dave Tate with Table Talk again. Today, the guest is John Meadows. We're going to be speaking about longevity.
And the mic's not on there.
So I got to start over?
Keep going.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about longevity. It's too loud. I'm too loud. This is how the live works. Longevity and other things. One of the things that we were just talking about when we were leading in, I don't know if they could hear it or not. I'm still too loud.
That's your headphones that are too loud.
Yeah.
Yours too quiet.
Yeah. Is cpap. And I was telling John the one thing I can't stand about the cpap isn't so much the thing on the face, but the damn hose. Because it's always in the way. You know, you got to roll around. It's like this stupid hose that connects you to your side table, you know, or whatever it is. And it's been 3 or 4 years, but when I really needed it, when I was really, really heavy in powerlifting, I never wanted it because Louis would always say that the CPAP was nothing more than an excuse for fat guys to get fatter. And it always happened. Seriously, this is what he would say. He would say, let's look at this from a realistic standpoint. You got somebody who really probably needs to lose 30 to 50 pounds. So instead of doing that, you're going to give them something that's going to enable them to rest and sleep and actually recover better. So now they're going to gain 30 more pounds. 30, yeah. And so now it's going to be 80 pounds more than that. And I'm like, fuck that. And I knew that in most cases it was the weight of the neck pushing down on the esophagus that was kind of choking them out. At least that was my comprehension at the time. So I'm like, fuck it, I am not training my neck ever. I'll get my traps big, my back big. I don't care. I don't need that to be strong. So I avoided all neck training at all costs. And that was my way to avoid the CPAP. But meanwhile, Tracy was still bitching the whole time because of the snoring and everything. But
you know what? I remember doing a neck curl. To me, I was like, I've never done that either because I read the same things you read.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to go to sleep with a Darth Vader mask on either. But now, you know, I hear all these guys that use them, and it gives me another excuse to not gain weight, to keep my weight nice and steady, because I know if I gain weight, I'll be in that situation where I'm snoring and all that. I'm like, no, thank you. I'll stay nice and light for now.
Yeah, yes, definitely. But from I guess the longevity standpoint, since this is a topic, if somebody is heavy and if they are snoring and they are not getting the rest that they're supposed to, you know, I would agree 100% with everything that Stan's putting out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, get a CPAP, you know, if you don't want to go the route of a sleep study, which I don't see how that's a bad thing. I think that's so easy now. When I had mine done, I went in, they give me a hat, you know, a neck thing they put over my. I didn't have to stay anywhere. I just went home. They did the sleep study. I came back, and here's your sleep app. But they are auto-regulated, and you can override the adjustment. So if it's not enough, you can take it up. But my question would be, if you're self-prescribing, I guess in a way is be what it would be, and it's actually cheaper to probably buy it off your insurance than it is on. I've seen that just with parts, that it's ridiculous how things work anymore. As a side note, one of the guys that works here needed an MRI of his shoulder, and the insurance cost was going to cost him like close to $3,000. He called directly to see what it would cost just to pay out of pocket. It was like $375.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me a bit.
It's unfucking believable. So you imagine what a CPAP is, right? $9,000 if you were to buy it through your insurance company. $700
I was going to say $500 to $800.
You know, something like that. But my question is, what if you actually need a BiPAP, you know, where you need the air pushed in and out, you know, then you really, if you're at that stage, you probably need to look at more things than just the CPAP.
Yeah.
You need to look at losing some weight and stuff like that. I have some things that I thought you would enjoy that I found the other night.
Okay.
Looking through.
Not boxes of Pop-Tarts.
No, but does that thing there bring back any memories?
Competitive bodybuilding, Joe Weider. Yeah, I had this one.
That had
Casey
to be
Vitor,
one of
Chris
the first.
Dickerson.
That had to be one of the first ones.
Yeah, I had this one.
See, I got it all highlighted and shit because
See,
I
this is
used
what I
that
do, yep.
when I did my first show. That's what I used.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
had this one. This is
And
a good
then
one.
I go back now and I look at the shit that I'm highlighting. Like, here's are the things that can show if you're overtrained.
I remember this. Oh yeah, ignore that section.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Confidence versus arrogance. I remember reading this. Yeah. Confidence often leads to a degree of cockiness. And in most cases, this adds to a champion bodybuilder's charisma. Yeah, this is Muhammad McCauley here, Scott Wilson. Man, these are the older dudes. I was in Philadelphia last weekend. You remember a guy named Greg Long?
Yeah.
Greg competed in the AAU. I remember watching him compete against a guy named Marlon Darton and Doug Brignoli, and it's always interesting having Mass. Yeah, I had this one too. Yeah.
That one's hard to find now. That was actually one of the better ones I remember when I was.
Oh man, yeah, God, all these pictures, man. This is oh God, I read this stuff over and over and over. There's John Aranita. Oh yeah, man, I remember these. I must have read these 100 times each. No doubt about it. Looking for the magic formula. Barry DeMay, yeah, Tony Pearson. It's funny. I've actually talked to a lot of these guys. Muscle Mag. See, so this is one of Gaspari's first covers, actually. Mm-hmm. This is when he won the Nationals. He was but 21 years old. There's the old Lou Ferrigno Hercules. I had this Corey one. Muscle Media 2000. Yeah, that was awesome for a little while.
No, I didn't take the time to try to find ones that you were in.
Well, probably because you would have been looking for a long time.
Yeah, but I was looking through a lot of the old shit that we had.
Yeah.
And like some of that stuff.
It's good stuff, man.
Goes back to your early competing days.
Yeah, well, this is I'm gonna guess this is from I'm gonna say 86ish.
Maybe.
Let me see.
It should be on the side.
Let me see. I'm gonna say this is from around 86, 87 or 86 maybe. Oh, this is 89. So okay, this was this was 80. Oh yeah, I could see Gaspari's pecs a little torn. I should have picked up on that. Yeah, that would have been in 89. Yeah, very cool. Corey, this one's probably around the same. No, this is 91. Whew. Remember when she tried to get into movies? She wasn't much the actress. Very cool, man.
So let's dive into the longevity, and let's just jump in anywhere. I mean, I can speak about mistakes that I made, training wise, joint wise, stuff like that. But I guess we got to first off kind of decide what we mean by longevity. Like, I see that two different ways. Like longevity, like we're going to live longer, or longevity, like you're going to be able to train harder for a longer period of time.
Yeah, I think in terms of option number 2.
That's what I think of, because I don't know how much control we have over option number 1.
Right.
In the grand scheme of things, you can do everything in the world to try to live longer and get hit by a car on your way home.
You just saw with Matt Porter. Matt was one of the most meticulous guys with his blood work and cardiogram, echocardios, and he passed away at 30-something years old. So you're right. And when I was sick and for my disease in 2005, I was in my early 30s, and I was that close to biting it. So yeah, you're right, man. Just don't know.
So let's go with let's break it down into extending the training age of how you would like to be able to train. Now, I think everybody needs to understand that that's going to change over phases of time. So we both competed at the highest levels of our respected sports. So there's the training is when you first get into it, which is just craziness, an extreme, and then it goes through different phases. So what I think that we're going to be talking about, and to be clear to the people listening, is the phase that happens after the peak phase. because you can only control the peak. The peak phase can only last so long.
Only last so
God,
long.
we wish it could last longer,
Yeah.
but it can only last so long. So, and everybody's peak phase is going to be different. And I think some of it's dependent upon what they decide. Some of it's dependent upon, obviously, age. You know, your age and how, in bodybuilding, how your look is. Age and powerlifting, how long your joints can take it, how long you can mentally take it. Just physically, how long you can take that.
Yeah.
And then you're dealing with, I don't think there's a whole lot we can do to extend the peak phase. I'm sure people would disagree. Maybe you disagree. But if you can, let's put it this way. If you can, it's going to be not that significance of a difference in time. Maybe an extra year.
Yeah. An extra, like, to maintain your peak. So one of the things that I've maybe changed my opinion on a little bit over the last 3 or 4 years is the ability to maintain. Not get better, but maintain. I actually think it's a lot easier to maintain a level as to getting to that level. So then the question becomes, when you're at that level, are you talking about, I got to get the bodybuilding thing out of my mind, because I think the muscle size and so forth, and I think that's kind of easy to maintain, but the training part, the crazy sets on the squats and all those things that are really problematic for your soft tissues and things like that, that's where I would say I think you're right. You can only extend that so long, man. Like the engine in the car can only go so, you can only use so much nitrous. And it's probably different for everybody, but I feel like we have the ability to extend that, but people don't listen. And I think it's because of the male ego, and it's because of things we get attached to. Like for me, I remember giving up heavy squats, putting a heavy bar on my back, and I know you can relate to this, was really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard, man. Like, you go into the gym, and I'm even still looking for an excuse. And every once in a while, I'll put a bar on my back, and sure enough, the next day I'm paying for it. 2 days ago, so I use your spider bar now. 2 days ago, I did 3 plates and a quarter on the spider bar, which is a good amount of weight for me now. And I had just done, so you're going to laugh at me. So every once in a while, for those of you guys listening, I do something really stupid, and I'll call Dave, and I'll go, man, listen to this. Listen how dumb this was. So on Saturday, I was training in Philadelphia with some young kids, really good kids, hard workers, and I wanted them to show like a full leg workout. So, we always finish with a stiff-legged deadlift. Well, that's obviously really hard on your lower back, or it can be. I haven't done those in years, right? So what did I do? I went up to 315 for a set of 8. Now, that's to people listening to this, that's not a lot of weight, but for me, that is a lot of weight. So I was like, oh, God, that was stupid. I'm going to be in so much pain tomorrow. That was so dumb. But I just couldn't help myself. And then, so I had to film yesterday, or 2 days ago. I had to film on Wednesday. I had to film a leg workout. And my hamstrings literally felt like I had surgery on them. They were so sore from having that new exercise I hadn't done. So I'm squatting. It feels like my hamstrings are going to tear. I'm like, man, this is probably not a good idea either. This doesn't feel right. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to go up to 3 1/4. I mean, I haven't done them in probably 4 months. But So so I'm picking my battles very wisely, but every once in a while I'll be stupid. But luckily, I'm stupid less often. And I think that's kind of the key when you get to our ages. There's so much meathead in us, it's almost impossible to eliminate the stupidity. But if you can just make it less frequent, that's probably our best option, is to just make it less frequent.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I would agree with acknowledging that you're going to do stupid things and you're going to make bad decisions. But that's for a lot of the people that I know, if you take that away, then they probably would never train again.
Yeah.
Because it seems like everything in between is just waiting for that next stupid act that you really love.
Right. Yeah.
And it's part of the mindset. Is part of who we are. It's not living in the past, so to say, but in a way it kind of is like, yeah, I remember when I used to be able to do this all the time, and this was fucking awesome. And this is great, and it's worth the pain, afterwards, as long as you didn't tear something off. And usually those battles you got to pick intelligently. Like, the stiff leg probably wasn't the best exercise to do that on,
right.
which but you could have picked a different one and gone just as crazy to be able to do that. So it's tough when you're talking about the competitors now trying to extend their career, because if they're at that top level, that is their focus. For most, it's their primary focus.
Mm-hmm.
So just to be able to get through to them, to have a conversation, to say, look, 8 weeks just kicking back and chilling isn't going to hurt you. It's probably going to help you. In most cases, they're probably not going to listen. Mm-hmm. It's a very hard conversation to be able to have. And
well, what have we always heard about Dorian's injuries and Ronnie's injuries? Well, that's just how they were. That's why they were a great champion. There was never any. Maybe they should have changed the mindset at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, you're right. That's just who they were. I think it takes a strong person. If something gets you from A all the way to Y, I think it takes a strong person to go, man, maybe I need to change some things to get to Z or to maintain Y.
Yes.
And that's hard for people.
Yeah. And from a bodybuilding standpoint, one of the mistakes that I've seen as an outsider looking in, and powerlifting, I've kind of seen the same, but just from a little bit different standard, is a lot of guys too take breaks. It's not really because they want to. I mean, it's just, to be completely honest, it's because of the drugs.
Yeah, drugs,
so they're taking the breaks, so they
yeah.
just pull back, because of that, because they don't think they're going to be able to make the gains or whatever it's going to be, but they're taking a break, and so they are giving themselves 2-3 months, sometimes even more. Mm-hmm. Usually 8 weeks is kind of typical, 6 to 8 weeks, right around that range. But then when they go back to training again, regardless of what sport, they don't transition back. It's like they jump in the cold water.
Yeah.
And I think that's problematic, because they need to have that's how I was. It's like, okay,
yeah,
break's over, rest period's over, off season's over, let's go. There's a little bit of a taper, not much, 2-3 weeks. Like a 3-week taper was like, yeah, fuck, this is way too long. This is perfect. This is all I need. I think if they extended that taper time, a little bit longer, 6, maybe 9 weeks, to be able to reacquaint themselves with the volume, the intensity, mm-hmm. Intensity in both factors for powerlifting, as far as weight, bodybuilding as far as how hard they're working, and acclimated a little bit better. I think that could add to longevity when stacked cycle after cycle, year after year after year after year after year. Because say each one of them adds just a few weeks, but then the argument could be made back. Well, you're kind of taking away 3 weeks every time I have to do this. So if you're adding 6 months more to my career, well, you already took away a year to add the 6 months more. Right. But what's more important, the 6 months more at the ass end where you're at your best, that's assuming that you step off at your best, which nobody does. Mm-hmm. What you really want to extend is when you're at your best.
Yeah. How long can you stay at your best?
That's the trick, man. And that's where they're mentally so engaged, and the ego is so engaged, and everything's so engaged, where...
And that's what I'm saying with like Ronnie and Dorian. Like if they could have just altered what they were doing, I think they could have extended their best for several years.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And that could just be them actually listening. I'm sure people were telling them, people listening to others to say, just let's kick it back just a notch. You can't tell me that Chad wasn't trying to get Ronnie to kick it back just a little bit, here and there. Because, then again, when you got 8 Sandows, what's the 9 mean?
I know.
You know what I'm saying?
I know it's easy for me to go, well, I could see how that 8 could have been 10. But when you're in his head, though, it's a little different mentality.
Yeah, and it's a different lifestyle from the bodybuilding perspective. The powerlifting perspective, it's just tough because from that mental side, you never had your best meet. There's always that factor of, well, if I added my best lifts together and they all happen in the best meet, well, that's still 150 pounds over my best total, which means I still should be able to get at least 75 pounds more. There's always that self-justification that's going in there when it comes to when it's time to walk away. And bodybuilding and powerlifting, it's tough because there's nobody there. It's not like the NFL, or it's not like any other sport where a coach just doesn't recruit you and you're done.
Well, and how many coaches are actually good at that stuff? Like, how many bodybuilding coaches do you know that are actually good at teaching longevity?
Zero, because that now we're opening a whole nother box.
They don't understand it.
Now we're open, a whole nother door just open here, because they're stuck on show prep, because it kind of works two ways. We got shitty coaches, but we also got shitty client education. That the client should know that if they're going to hire a coach, it should be a long-term commitment. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you're really serious about this and you really want to do a show and and do well in the show, make the commitment for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Because there's only so much you can do as a coach with somebody 12 weeks out.
Only so much, that's right.
You can salvage the muscle, get them shredded, but you can't fix any weak points. Yeah. You can't bring up weak points. And anybody that says they can is full of shit, because if they can, they're either extremely good, which is beyond most people. You're dealing with a far outlier, because you're going to do this in a calorie deficit. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about. All right, you're a really good chemist that knows how to manipulate shit, in a calorie deficit. Normally, though, you put them in a calorie surplus. They do the show. You let their hormones kind of get back to normal if they're using PEDs or not. If not, it's a little quicker process. And it's like, okay, we got to bring up the biceps, man. And then you got 6 months just to think of the difference. But the clients are all short-term thinking, because everybody is every 12 weeks, 10 weeks, 8 weeks, and then you get the dumbass coaches that capitalize on that. They run with it. I got this great 12-week program. It's going to fix all your problems.
Yeah.
You see?
It's marketing. And a lot of the coaches now are younger. And I was a young coach once. I get it. Mm-hmm. And their goal is to get as famous as they can as quickly as they can. And so they're going to take everybody from 0 to 200 and with nitrous as fast as they can. And those people sometimes have kidney problems. I've seen a lot of people on dialysis. Sometimes they die. And it is, and it's a weird sport, because really nobody cares. People will have a sad day and then they go about their lives after that. There's really there's really very little lessons learned in bodybuilding, because people always say, well, that was just him. That was just his genetics, or that was just, nobody ever says, I wonder if that approach was the best. I wonder if starting off and taking 3 grams of test and a gram of tren and a gram of mass, I wonder if that's the best approach for me. Nobody even really says that. In fact, it's become commonplace now to take these sky-high dosages. People, the young guys, just think it's normal now. Like, what seems crazy to you and me, like mind-boggling, is normal now. Like, that's normal. And then on top of that, you can't teach longevity until you've lived longevity. Mm-hmm. You can't take someone who's 24 years old and have them teach you how to lift into your 40s or 50s. I just don't. It's one of those things that you have to live, in my opinion, because the best teachers on longevity are the ones who have made the most mistakes, have had the most injuries, who've had to learn how to think. And, for us, it was interesting, because when I was coming up on my pro card, and even after I got my pro card training out here with you, I couldn't quite do the heavy lifts. So we were always in a mission every week. Well, how can we really load the muscle and hammer it without getting injured? So, that's the advantage I had. You had a watchful eye on me. Well, a lot of these guys, they don't even understand that. So it's, if something's not right, you just work through it and then pop, or they're just broken down, in a couple of years. So, yeah, man, the longevity part from that perspective is really tough too. There's no good coaching. Many times you got to learn the hard way. Many times you got to give up exercises that you don't want to give up because you love them. And then if you do that, you have to really push hard on the other stuff, really hard. and that can be quite painful too. And a lot of people don't like that nowadays either, because they're scared they're going to overtrain. So it's a combination that makes true good longevity in our sport very difficult to achieve.
Well, painful and time consuming too, because let's say the deadlift is a great back builder. You're a great example of this. Deadlift was a great back builder for you, but at a certain point in time it had to go. So how many exercises does it take to make up for the same thing that deadlift was doing? Well, over a period of time and progression, about 60 sets of a lot of different things. That's not saying that the person listening should go do 60 sets of back work, but that's what it ended up being, is damn close to 60 sets, to be able, not saying that all you could do is deadlift and get away with it. It was one part, but 3 or 4 movements just to take care of what that one, was able to do. And I think that a lot of the coaching and a lot of the advice is out there. It's just we're looking at, I like to phrase it as, we're on the other side of the table now, where when we were in our 20s, we had people telling us the same shit we're trying to tell people today. Look, you might not want to, be hitting the overhead presses as hard as you're doing all the time. You might not want to be, as a bodybuilder, you might not want to be benching, all the time. You might want to kick it back on the squats, a little bit. You might want to keep the dose down just a little bit. Yep. We heard all of this from the 45, 50-year-old guys sitting on the other side of the table trying to give us advice. And in our mind, we're like, dude, you're fucking washed up. You're done. You haven't been relevant for 10 fucking years. Fuck you. I'm doing what I got to do to get better. Well, that's life's crazy spin, sir.
Now here we are.
Now here we are. Now we're on the other side of the table. Yeah. And it's like, guys, listen. And a lot of the advice is the same. A lot's not. I think that things have changed. That we were told just don't do certain things. Where now the advice is you can still do them, but the moderation, here's how you can moderate through it and all that kind of stuff. But so I think to stay on the point of how to increase the peak years, from a powerlifting perspective, I think the most underlooked aspect, which I can't give you an idea on how many years it's going to add or how many meets it's going to add, but even if it's one meet during their peak time frame, that could be that one meet where they pull it all together. I think nutritionally they've gotten better than what it used to be. I think they just need to keep pulling that together. And I'm not talking supplementation, and I'm just talking making better food choices. Where it is, JM and I spoke about this, it is very hard to gain weight with all clean foods, but you can still do it with 50% clean foods. It doesn't have to be to the degree that I went to, where it was 100% all bad food, because that's the only thing that worked. It did work for me, right? But I could have made better choices on 50%.
Secret diet to gain weight. Remember that?
Yeah. And we spoke about that, and it was interesting, some of the things that he said, because I asked him why, and some of it I didn't really think about. Like the McDonald's, the breakfast sandwiches in the morning. He was saying that if you look at the science behind how McDonald's designs their foods, it's designed to go down your system fast.
Right.
You could take a cheeseburger, and it's true.
Yeah, that way you can eat 5 of them.
Yeah, you put the cheeseburger in your mouth, and the next thing you know, you swallowed it, and you don't know how it happened.
Yeah.
So that's why.
So you order 5 the next time.
Yeah, so that's why, because it's calories.
Yeah.
It's still calories. It's not healthy. He was very clear about that. It's not healthy, and we never said this was healthy.
Yeah. But
it gets down.
Yeah.
And that becomes, and I'm like, oh my God, I never thought that was why. Because like, why not just like a ton of bacon? I can there's a million ways to make up the same amount of calories.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't just melt down your mouth.
Right.
They have food scientists that design this food to where it almost just dissolves in your mouth and becomes addictive.
Yeah.
So you want to eat more because mentally it's got shit in it that makes you want. So I'm sitting there like, oh my God, this is like way more thought out than I thought. But from a powerlifting perspective, I think that And I think some of that's being done now. I think that the other area would be just better recreational lifestyle choices, better control of stress, for those people that are out drinking and shit like that. If you're in your peak years, you just stop. I get that. I don't drink alcohol, so I'm making a very...
Did you drink when you were in your 20s?
No.
Never?
I already had other choices that I made that I felt were putting my health at risk.
Life-threatening.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
it's like I don't
mean.
want to add to that, especially to when it wasn't going to benefit me in any way.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I'm going to use a test. All right, well, that means I can't drink now.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I framed it. Plus, I also bounced, so I worked around drunk people.
Yeah.
And I hated drunk people. I hated the way they acted. So I had a lot of reinforcing behaviors as to not do that. But if they're in their peak years, just maybe it helps you relax, but is it really necessary? Just pull it. It could be argued.
I think what's crazy, so this is what's amazing about when you're in your 20s. Like, I grew up and I never had a beer till I was out of high school. I had I didn't have a beer till I was actually headed for vacation in Ocean City, Maryland. After I graduated from high school, it was the first beer I ever had. And I went a little crazy in college. Like, I was like, I've been missing this. Everybody else was partying with me. So I went a little crazy.
Oh, yeah, most do.
So, yeah, most people do in college.
I saw all you fuckers in the bars.
Yeah, I was one of those guys. I was one of those drunks. So, but I was training really hard back then.
Yeah.
And I will never forget going out with my buddy Daryl, Daryl Mayo. And that was when he had just quit drinking and I had just started drinking. But drinking a lot, waking up, getting home at 3 a.m, had to be at the gym at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning to squat, and squatting, I could smell the alcohol on me. And I was, that's when I was squatting 606 plates for sets of 8, 10 with a hangover. Like, I can't even comprehend that now. Like,
you're in 20s, but let's flip it back to Daryl. And super great and nice guy, by the way. So I want to put that out there because he trained at Westside for a while. His father trained at Westside for a while. So I have nothing bad to say about the guy at all whatsoever. But what I can say is his dad did have a lot of muscle tendon problems.
Yeah.
So there was some genetic stuff going on there. And so did Daryl.
Yeah, he's had a lot of injuries he's had to deal with.
In a case such as that, with the knowledge that he has, I'm sure in hindsight, if he was to think back, he would think, maybe I wouldn't have been doing that, knowing that this could be a potential factor. Mm-hmm. Notice I didn't say cause. I don't want to get called out of my words. Yeah. But a factor. Mm-hmm. Because I think that for a while there, his kid was training out with Louie. And I can guarantee he's probably making sure his kid's not making the same mistakes that he was doing, because it doesn't help an athlete who's I think a football player. I'm not sure what his kid's doing. Mm-hmm. It doesn't help him very much with a torn pec, or blown off tricep or whatever it's going to be. But when you're in your 20s, I don't want to mention names, but at Westside we used to train our bench out at somebody else's. It was Tim Van Horn's garage
in the London Grove.
Yes, and that was Sunday morning. I can remember the number of times walking in there, and it was like, oh my God, this smells like a fucking bar. Like, these guys just came in. It's like they just shut down they closed down the bar. They went to breakfast for a few hours.
Yeah, there they were.
And came in and trained. And they were just killing shit. And I'm like, how is this possible?
Look at Jerry O. He was a crack addict.
Yeah.
He would come in off a binge and incline 500 pounds.
He won the fucking the bench classic at the Arnold Classic bench bash. And I think this is common knowledge. Mickey Tate had to pull him out of a crack house to take him to the meet. Yeah. To which he then won.
Right.
Which is, so can we make the case now that, you go a whole different direction?
Yeah.
So from that longevity standpoint, let's go back a little bit and say, let's say you just started, because that's where a lot of people who are really trying to absorb material are not the people who are at the best and they're not at their peak.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually, in my opinion, what they should be doing is trying to keep all material away and just focus on what they know works or what they're working with their coach, and disregard all other material completely, and just focus on this session, this session, this session,
right.
this show, or this session, this meet.
Yep.
Fuck everything
Perfect
else.
every day.
Don't even look at what's going on as far as different training. The people who are really absorbing information are the intermediates, and I think they're the ones that probably, two people who have the biggest questions are the intermediates and the people who are older and beat up.
Yeah.
The intermediates are wondering what they should do to not end up being beat up.
Right.
And the first answer I have to them is just quit.
If you want the reality of it, yeah.
I'm telling the dead truth, because and I'm not just talking from arthritis standpoints or bone, tendon, muscle injury standpoints. I'm talking just overall health standpoints. Things with, heart, blood pressure, stroke, all these different things. Everything a doctor's ever told me when I was younger, you know what, you should just quit. And if you quit, this probably won't happen. It's been true.
Yeah.
When you're older and you go in, now all they're doing is validating, but the good doctor is going to be the one that's going to tell you, yeah, you probably should quit doing this stuff, but
let's figure out how to work around it.
Let's figure out how to do this, because this is a huge component of your life.
Right.
So I think the younger intermediates need to first really, really ask themselves, how important is getting better?
Yeah.
Do they want to just train to have
a little
fun?
bit of a hobby, or is it something
hobby,
you're really passionate about?
or really push? And we're not talking PEDs and stuff like that. We're just talking how hard you want to push. Because pushing hard on, let's talk bodybuilding, pushing hard on a 4-day split, 1 day off, or even 3 days on, 1 day off, with just a couple, or every day. That's demanding,
If you really push it,
if you really push it, it's demanding. And even if you just train twice a week, HIIT style, that's demanding. And all that's going to be wear and tear. So for them, it's making that decision first. And then my advice, and I'll let you build off that, would be take the time to get your technique right on everything, not just the big stuff. Like everybody wants to squat, bench, and deadlift. In my world, squat, bench, and deadlift right, but they don't take the time to look at if they do leg curls as an accessory.
Yep.
What is your lower back doing when you're doing a leg curl?
Yep.
Take the time to really, really, and your channel's doing a good job of going through and showing all the accessories and what they should be looking at.
Trying to hit everything.
And that's a great resource for you guys, is to look at John's channel and look at I can almost say for most of you guys, forget the big movements, because you're probably pretty dialed in on them. I would think most intermediates are pretty dialed in, except for little tiny things like breathing and, their feet, stuff. Things that matter at the top end, but not really at the intermediate. But look at the little stuff, because you actually do more volume on that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you really do. Because if you're doing 5 sets of 10 on leg curls, and I'll guarantee if your lying leg curl screwed up, you're arching too hard on that. So is your seated leg curl.
Yeah.
And so is every leg curl machine you ever do.
Yep. Then your lower back's tight, and it messes up your squat, and there's a definite snowball effect for sure.
Yeah. So that would be my first tidbit of advice to throw out there, is to make sure technique wise it's solid. So what would you add to that?
So 2 things. I always hear this advice that beginners and intermediates should forget the isolation stuff. They should just do compound stuff, bang for your buck, movements. I think that's very bad advice, and here's why. How can you teach your pecs to contract in a barbell bench press? How can you isolate them? Well, you can't. You're using your anterior delt, your triceps, etc. But there are movements, I think you should learn how each muscle contracts. So some guys say don't train your arms directly. You'll get plenty of arm work. Well, how do I really know what a good bicep contraction feels like from a lat pull down? Because if I'm doing a lat pull down right, I shouldn't feel a great bicep contraction. I should feel a lat contraction. So I think just the general thought process of including isolation stuff with the compound stuff is number one. Number two, and people always get on me about this, I am a stickler in what you just said particularly for the basic movements in terms of longevity, and that's form. And I tell everybody, if your form is about to go, you stop your set. And people go, no, John, they're not pushing hard enough. No, get what when you're working with 85-90% of your 1 rep maximum weight, you're going to get full activation. As long as you're coming within a rep or so of failure, you're getting what you need out of the movement. Now, when you go to the isolation movements, if you have practiced them and you've got good technique and you feel them, use those movements to really, really push hard. Use those movements to not only load the muscle, but to really fatigue the fibers, do the stuff that we used to do, full reps, then partial reps, or a drop set, or all those things that take kind of your intensity to the next level. There's nobody that's going to convince me that you can reach your best, and this is what we're talking about, getting to your peak and maintaining it. You can't get to your peak unless you've really pushed hard. Like, there's just no way that you can convince me that you can get to your absolute peak without training with a really high level of effort and pushing pain and so forth. So it just becomes, how do you intelligently do that? So to your point, good form, learning isolation movements when everybody else is saying they're worthless. They're not worthless. They're very valuable. Doing these high risk movements, a squat, those need to be technically proficient. But as you mentioned, even the isolation movements, I was just teaching in England 2 weeks ago, and we had this big debate on how to do a correct leg curl. And I liked it. I was good. I was like, this is a good conversation to have, Should your hips be popping up off the bench, Now, I like to do my leg curls with a little speed, a little bit more explosive, but look at my back and look at the tension. I've never had a hamstring injury ever, and I feel a massive amount of tension, but I'm really dialed into that muscle. I'm tuned into it. There's no momentum. It's just contracting hard. And you can apply that to a lot of different movements. But that is kind of the root, like that's step one in this conversation we're having is learning isolation movements. It's being very intelligent with your form on the other movements. Learn that first, and then we start graduating into okay, now you're going to get some mileage on your body. Now what do you do when your form is perfect, but you still hurt? So now Dave has taught me how to squat perfect, but I wake up and now my lower back's starting to hurt. I didn't do anything wrong, so now what do you do? And that's the part that people don't get. That's the part where they can't transition into, maybe those squats we were doing every week needs to be every other week. Maybe it just needs to be when I feel great. Or maybe I need to dial down the intensity on them, but I got to do something. If I'm waking up and my back is killing me for 2 days, and this is what people, their body will tell them. They just don't listen. If you do a movement and something that you didn't intend to be hurting is hurting, like your body's telling you something. And when you talk to people about tears, they usually tell you that 1 rep felt kind of funny, but I thought, okay, it'll be okay. The next rep, pop. Well, the same thing happens with this nagging stuff that builds up for us. Mm-hmm. Like, I know that if I do something and I'm hurting really bad the next couple of days, it probably wasn't a good idea. So I got to pick but this is what guys, what do? They take painkillers, they take Advil, they take NSAIDs and stuff like that. Like, that's the worst thing you can be taking. And they just keep going and trying to work through it when they should be looking at their training and saying, man, let's think about these squats. I know I love them, but let's think about how often we're doing them. Let's think about, this is one great thing you taught me. Let's think about the bar that we're using. Is a barbell, putting it right on your back, is it the best idea for you at this stage? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Probably not for me. So there's a whole line of thinking that comes with experience that you really can't learn in a book. Of listening to your body and being wise with exercise selections, with bars that you use, and all kinds of stuff like that. That to me is the beauty of longevity. Like, that's what it all is encompassed by. It's exercises, it's how you execute on them, it's listening to your body. That's kind of it. That's what you have to unravel.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on the isolation work, and I think I put that as part of an article in T-Nation years ago, and it was that was back when forums were a thing, and I caught a lot of shit for it. And this is for a power lifter. It wasn't for the bodybuilder. They're like, oh, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, well, it's if in the few years I did bodybuild is probably why I discovered the importance of this, because I had two guys I was training with that were really, really big on, the whole mind muscle connection type of thing. And I do believe that exists. It's hard to explain, why it exists. I'm sure there's people that can explain why it exists, but you're always kind of looked at as the freak, when you start talking about stuff like that. Even though Arnold said it, first, probably not first, but years ago. But if I'm telling somebody on their bench press that I need you to squeeze your pinkies or pull the bar apart because I want you to be flexing your triceps harder, they need to know what flexing their triceps even means.
What does it even feel like? Yep.
So, if they're going to be at a high level in powerlifting, bodybuilding, or whatever it is, I should be able to sit across from, you sit across from you in a relaxed state and say, just sit relaxed and flex your left tricep. And just bam, boom, you hit your left tricep. Hit your right, boom, you hit your right bicep. Biceps are easy, pecs are easy. I mean, it's usually the first to come for most people are going to be the pecs, and then it's going to be the biceps. But somebody that's experienced, been really focusing on this, can hit their triceps, their delts, their calves, their quads, their hamstrings. Now, you're probably doing this as I'm saying it because it's so natural and it's been practiced so frequently. I can remember sitting in high school class, just sitting there, okay, that's the hamstring, just trying to flex these type of things. And then it carries through, because if it's a matter of squatting and you got to, everybody's into activation now. You need to activate this. You need to activate that. You need to do these movements to activate this. Why not just flex the fucker? If you want to activate it, flex it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Especially like with the hip flexor, right?
Yeah. I mean, do you need 12 exercises to prime you to flex a fucking muscle? Why not just teach them how to flex the muscle?
Yeah.
And you know what? That's not an easy thing to do. I think it does take isolation exercises to be able to actually learn that. I don't know how else you could. Maybe there are ways that gymnasts use, or I don't know, but I don't know. And you got to have something to flex. That's the other thing. You can't flex bone.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, because bone. I'm saying this for that dumbass that called me out once in a comment. Yes, you can flex. Yes, I get that. I understand your bones do flex and move. I get that. That's not the point, you dumb fuck.
But they don't pump up.
Yeah, exactly. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. You can't flex bone, but what a great time to do that, would be as a beginner.
Yeah.
Because the stronger they get, as a power lifter, the more the body begins to start working almost like a sprint car. It's like, boom, green light goes, everything fires at once. And that's what you want as a power lifter. That's what you want. But what I tell them is every now and again, you need to take that dragster and you need to put it in the shop. You need to take everything apart. You need to pull that engine all apart, lay all the parts out, start cleaning them, start taking care of them, replace the ones that need fixed. Well, those parts are body parts. So every now and again, you need to pull the car in the shop, start doing some bodybuilding type training, clean up those parts, because all those small muscles, all these isolation muscles, they're also called stabilizers.
Yep.
And you have to stabilize force to produce it, and they're not doing that. That's where I think a lot of the injuries could be avoided during the peak phase for the strength athlete. Once they're developed and once they have that connection, I don't know how much they really need to be doing, isolation work.
Sure.
A little bit here and there is probably going to help them more with just recovery, because it's a lot of those type of movements, like just push downs and curls. I call them very concentric, heavy movements, because the eccentric phase is not really that, unless you're really trying to concentrate on it.
Yeah.
It's not that demanding. The eccentric phase of a push down
Yeah.
is not that demanding unless you make it,
not like
which as a
lowering-
bodybuilder, you're going to make it, or a curl the same way. But as a power lifter, you can knock that stuff out, get a big pump, and then the next day not even be sore because the eccentric is so far. It's almost concentric only, but not really. But a great way to pump a lot of blood in there to help with that recovery. And with that blood, I think I need to explain, comes the nutrients, which we talked about earlier, is what nutrients are you allowing to flow through there? Ho-hos or,
Yeah, right.
good solid amino acids that are broken down from quality proteins.
Yeah.
Or quality sugar, glycogen, to be able to help with the recovery process. So I think we've kind of hit, I don't think we've missed a lot with the beginners because it should be pretty, consistency matters with them. Don't overtrain. That's a big one for beginners. And overtraining, I think, is overused word. But for beginners, let's just say don't train too much. You don't have to train. I get you love it. I did it. You did it, right? We train for 4 hours a day, every day. I get that you love it. But, man, just try to avoid that because it's still wear and tear that adds up over the years. Hold some of that passion for the next training session.
Yeah.
Put it into the intensity because their muscular coordination and just their general coordination probably isn't good enough yet for them to really go hard.
Right.
They think they are, but they're not.
When I think a lot of them are using like soreness as a gauge, and they have to do a ton of volume to even get sore because, to your point, they don't quite have that connection. If they had that, when you get real efficient, real good at this stuff, you could make yourself sore from a few sets, as opposed to needing to do set after set after set after set. Yeah.
And when we were hammering it with the volume is when I became more familiar with muscular soreness. Because powerlifting, it's just more like you get beat with a club. It's more because everything's firing like the dragster. So the next day is like, oh fuck, that was a bitch.
Yeah.
And bones hurt. Stuff like that. But there really wasn't a lot of muscular soreness. When we were training, there was a lot of muscular soreness. And what I realized was you knew you're recovering properly. You knew the training was on point. And you knew the nutrition was on point when you started to get sore a few hours after the training session. Intra Nutritional, I think, plays a big role, and I'll let you talk about that. I never got sore the day after. If I got sore the day after, then I started wondering where maybe it was too much, but something was wrong.
Yeah.
Because usually it was a few hours later the cramping started. Sometimes the cramping started before I left.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay. It was usually 3 hours later the cramping started. And then several hours later the soreness started. Then that night the soreness was pretty bad.
Yep.
The next morning, residual, middle of next day, fine.
Then you're good. Yep.
But I do think that some of that might have been the Intra protocol, but maybe, I know you've played with it more than I have, maybe only by maybe a day. It might have saved one, you know what I'm saying? It might have cut a day down.
Yeah.
What if that wasn't there? Would that have been the same scenario? That's what I'm asking.
So you get people to throw in the repeated bout effect, like, you'll get used to it, you won't get as sore, and that is a scientific principle. But their training protocol is not like what you and I had.
It changed every time.
You don't get the benefit of repeated bout effect from what you and I did, because we were thinking, how can I absolutely annihilate the muscle?
Yes.
That's what every workout we did, that was the goal.
Yes.
Annihilation. And it's funny you mentioned the cramps, because as soon as you start talking about soreness, I thought, I'm on the way home and I'm getting cramps in my teardrops. And then that night, 3-4 hours later, it's peaking, and it's bad. And of course, everybody's got other theories. Oh, your electrolytes are messed up. I'm like, no, you don't understand how we just trashed the muscle.
No, it was not that.
You could eat all the salt you want. You can drink all the Gatorade you want. It wasn't going to stop the pain. But then, the next day or 2 days later, you're good to go. Now, I will say this. Before the Intra stuff was introduced, like my legs, for example, would be sore for a legitimate 4 to 5 days. legitimate 4 to 5 days every time. And the Intra stuff brought it down to not sore the next day, or maybe just a little bit the next day. Like the whole concept of DOMS, like the second day went away. Like I never got DOMS again. I would just get it that night and maybe a little bit next day, but there was no second day. By then it was gone. And that was strictly from nutrition, because if you think about what we were doing with our food, people say, well, you only have to be in positive nitrogen balance. That's all you need to be in a caloric surplus, and you'll repair as fast as you can possibly repair. I get the logic. I see what you're saying. I understand that when you ate a steak, the aminos are still in your blood. You had I get that. I understand that. And that's part of the reason why I can't even reconcile why it works so well. And those are the arguments I get. And I can't tell people, like, I don't like where you're coming from, because I get it. It makes sense what they're saying, but it just doesn't work when someone trains like the way we were training. The Intra stuff, just shoving nutrients into the muscle while you're training, is the only way I've found that can keep that soreness down. And I think that helps with the longevity too, personally. Not having just your body, and you can train your muscle fibers so hard they die and they have to regenerate. That's proven. We probably killed a few muscle fibers, I'm guessing, maybe we didn't need to kill. But the nutrition stuff was really, really key for me. And then if you look at, like, I don't know if you remember or not, but remember us saying we're going to demonstrate that it doesn't work. We're going to train real hard until we're crippled sore. But when we were playing around with those protocols, we would kill each other and we'd be fine. So that was a big deal. But I think just from the recovery aspect, that's fine. But I think to the whole point of this conversation, the longevity piece, I think it really helps. I don't really understand maybe the management of the inflammation. I don't really understand the mechanism, but I feel like, when you can train, go through a full range of motion for your joints, when you're healing up fast, I feel like there's probably some benefit to longevity there as well. I can't really explain it. It's just something I feel like, and when I travel now, if I don't do an Intra, I had a workout I told you about in California 3 weeks ago where I just went crazy and I didn't have my Intra. I was crippled sore for 5 days, crippled sore. And that can't be good for longevity, to always have your body inflamed and just trash like that.
All right, to stay going down that hole, if we have, say, the nutritional stuff, I understand what you're talking about as well with the amino acid, pool, which is in your blood for, hours upon hours upon hours, and all that other kind of stuff, which, our bodies are very good at pulling what amino acids are needed to go where they need to go when they need to go there. So that always kind of confused me with, I always say, I've taken one nutritional biochem class, so I'm an expert, which is far from the fucking truth. But that's why I never really understood, why you would take amino acids that are medium or small chain, because they all end up small chain, because it's the only way it's going to pass through the intestines to break down. But that would, with what you're talking about with the Intra, that only really leaves the glycogen then, because is that the factor, is just the point that there's glycogen or sugar, so to say, not sugar, but you get what I'm saying, fast acting carbohydrate being, or high molecular weight, however anybody wants to define it.
Sure.
Being there in the muscle while you're training, the most important part.
So you can make the same argument you make with protein for carbohydrates.
Because there's fats breaking down to create the energy if it's not there.
Well, the carbs are generally speaking, you'll have enough carbs in you to last you, say, 24 hours. So if you've had a meal 2 hours before you train, people will say you have plenty of glucose that's went into your blood that at some point is turning to glycogen. They will say, you have the same argument that you have with the aminos. So my theory is that when you're introducing the carbs, if they're not causing a spike, if they're more creating a steady level of insulin release, or raising your blood sugar more on an even keel as opposed to a spike, then your pancreas produces insulin at a more even level, and that's what manages cortisol, and that's what manages muscle protein breakdown. And we know that from they measure a muscle protein breakdown marker called 3-methylhistidine, And you can see that when aminos and carbs, but particularly carbs, when they're used while you train, you can see the reduction, the huge reduction in 3-methylhistidine. The muscle protein breakdown goes way, way, way down. I wish there was more done on it. There's not a lot of research on it. There's only some done because all the research is pre and post workout. They don't really look at intra workout that much. But the stuff I've seen, I've only seen a little bit that was done by, if you look up Bird 2006 in Australia, they did some nice work on it. But that's the best thing I can come up with, is that there's something about delivering it while you train, getting that nice little lift in insulin while you train. You know, somebody could even still come back, though, and go, well, you got the same thing from the food. So I get it. Like, man, I get it. Like, I can't really explain succinctly why the liquid stuff while you train works so much better. I just know that it does. I also will tell you, if you don't train really, really hard, then it's meaningless. It shows its value when you're training really, really hard and you're really breaking down a lot of muscle. Because that's what we do when we train. We just break down muscle. You're not building anything. You might be stimulating muscle protein synthesis, but the bottom line is you're creating a hell of a lot of catabolism too. You're breaking it down. And to train like how you and I did, we're not digging the ditch 1 foot deep or 2 foot deep. We're going down 5 or 10 feet deep.
Yeah.
So now think about what it takes just to get back up to where we were. You got to have a real focus on this stuff. And you know, and a lot of people might say, well, you know, the stuff you and Dave did was probably too hard. You did too much. Maybe it was on occasion, but you know what? I was approaching 40 years old. I put another inch on my legs training the way we did. You know, my back was a weak point. It sure looked pretty impressive a couple years after doing all those crazy hard sets. So for me, it was what I needed.
I think the statement I think that statement is extremely irrelevant, because the goal was the pro card, and you got that. Now everything past that was bullshit, because you weren't supposed to do anything past that. But we've had that conversation. Other people don't know about that, but that was supposed to be John's last show. But I understand why he kept going, you know. So everything past that was icing on the cake, but the goal was the pro card, you know. So if that's what it took, even let's just say it was placebo.
Yeah.
If that's what it took, that's what it took.
That's what it took.
And it worked. To circle back to the longevity, we've covered the beginners, you know, with the biggest advice being there, work the technique, you know, control the intensity of that. You're still going to need a lot of volume, guys, if you're a beginner, because you need to learn how to master the movements. Right. So we're not telling you to train hard. We're not trying to tell you to train to failure. We're trying to tell you to do a lot of repetitions to really learn the skill of the movements, and to pay attention to making sure you're adding in isolation exercises. And probably, in a way, I think we both agreed, equally as much on that as you would the basic compound movements, just to be able to learn how the muscles work. Pay attention to the nutrition. It doesn't have to be crazy solid for you. You're a beginner. You're just getting used to stuff. You just get used to the training stresses. There's been very few football strength coaches that I've ever met that didn't like the idea of their athletes having something to eat during the training session. A lot of times it's a peanut butter sandwich, so I don't want to tell them, "Hey, go buy Intra."
No,
you know, just have some. Make sure you're going to have some kind of surplus if you can, unless you need to lose weight.
You just want to feel good during your workout.
Yes,
you know?
yes. So you feel good for the training, and you don't need to train every day for 4 hours. We've went through and covered what the guys should do in their prime. You know, they're not going to listen to it, so we're not going to spend any more time on those. They're not. You know that. They're not, you know. And if we bring up anything, they're going to ask their coach. Their coach is going to say those guys are full of shit, and they're not going to do it. So,
they're 24-year-old coach.
Yeah, you know, and let's put it this way. The guys who are in their prime, we're known well enough, and we are open enough. If they really want to know, they'll contact us directly.
Yeah.
Now let's get to the people who really care. And those are the ones that are older, kind of like us. You know, I don't want to say past prime, and I don't want to use a life extension, because I don't think that's possible. You know, I think that's a bullshit excuse. It's quality of life or quality of training, you know, past prime. or as you're older. And that's what I think people really want, but I didn't want to have the conversation without covering the full gambit of the training age, because it all is wear and tear. And when I get to my main points, wear and tear is going to be a huge part of that conversation, which happens to, if you're in this for the long term and you've been doing it for 20, 30 years, you're paying the price, in your 45s, 50s for shit you were doing when you were 16 and 17. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
Everything has a price to pay. And we all know that. Even when we're younger, we're like, oh yeah, I know at some time I'm going to pay for this shit. Or you do that crazy set when you're 19 and you're on the ground about ready to die. And man, I'm so going to pay for this someday. Well, guess what? You turn 45, that fucking day comes.
Yeah.
So when you get out of bed, you can't stand up, think about that set.
Yeah.
And it'll make you smile a little bit too.
Yeah.
Because you earned,
right.
you earned the ability for your feet to hurt like fuck. But when you get there, you do start wondering, fuck, was it really worth it? And I'll say from my end, looking back, yes, and I've been through some shit. You've been through a lot of shit. I think you agree with me that looking back, it's always worth it.
1,000%.
It's always worth it. So let's start speaking about that. Okay, so I'll let you start out on the nutrition end. You're far more, obviously, far more educated and experienced in the nutritional side of controlling cortisol. The nutritional side of being able to control stress, because I think that's a huge factor when you get older, because it's not just the training you're recovering from. I think that's a mistake people make. As you get older, you have kids, you have jobs, you have responsibilities.
That's exactly where I was
headed. Other factors, you know. So nutritionally, let's start knocking away nutritionally on what they can be looking at doing to help with quality of training for the next 20 years. So let's approach it that way.
And these are the people who've been training for a long time, or
anybody that's 45 plus. So it can even be a beginner that's 45 plus. But I think we kind of covered them because training age does matter.
Sure.
Like they're going to start a little bit more banged up just because they're older, but their joints haven't. We're going to have the discussion based upon the fact that they have 10, 15 years of wear and tear, but everything's still going to apply.
Well, so that whole discussion about getting hammered and drinking and being able to train when you're in your 20s, that's awesome. You're capable of doing so much stuff when you're in your early years, but when you get into your 40s and 50s, now those things like sleep quality, nutrition, now those things take on a whole nother level of importance. Like you just look at like sleep, for example. If you look at all the sleep studies where they do sleep restriction for 4 hours, you see increases in ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone your stomach makes. You see decreases in leptin, which is a satiety hormone that your fat cells make. And so you're not full, you're hungry all the time, and guess what you crave? You crave sugar. So you get these people that sleep less, and what you see is their energy consumption, which is just how many calories they eat, it goes up. They start eating a bunch of trash. And here's another thing that you don't notice when you're 20s, but when you're in your 40s or 50s, sometimes you'll eat a bad meal and you feel it the next day. Like you can feel the inflammation in your joints. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
You'll be eating good, you're eating good, and you have a day where you eat a bunch of bad stuff, and the next day it feels like you got hit by a truck. Did that ever happen in your 20s? Nope.
Let me ask you this, just to throw a little fun into this, and we'll stay on the nutrition aspect. Sometimes it happens almost immediately.
Like
you ever have a Baconator?
Oh, no. Don't go there.
No, we're there. We are there. So John's got a story that...
We've been holding this story back for many
who
years.
was it? Yeah,
Santana Anderson was here.
Santana Anderson was here, and he's the one that told me about this. But John decided to have a Baconator, and...
Yeah, man. So we trained really hard here. Really hard, and Santana's like, can we stop by Wendy's on the way back? And I'm like, sure. What do you want to get? And he goes, let's get a Baconator. I was like, what's that? He's like, just trust me, it's really good. It's like, okay, all right, I'll get a Baconator. So I don't have an intestine, I don't have a colon, which means I have a really fast transit time for food. like really fast. So I eat the Baconator and I'm driving, and I'm like, uh-oh, there's no bathrooms in sight. So what ensued when I got home was pure carnage.
Keep going.
Oh man, it was bad. So I called Dave. I messaged Dave and I said, "Man, I just shit everywhere." And you're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Literally, I shit everywhere. Like it's all over the place. I'm cleaning the bathroom right now."
He was cleaning the walls,
everything, man.
The whole toilet, and it's that's been the Baconator story.
That was the Baconator story.
So of course I think
you had a Baconator since then.
I don't think so.
I immediately went out the next day and had one, and I'll tell you what, my story, it wasn't as bad, but my stomach within 2 hours was. I was on the toilet. It was
so it wasn't just me.
No. Like if you ever need to cut weight quick and you need to clear out your gut, there's a good 2 pounds that's going to come out real quick.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Anyhow, get back on the nutrition. So you were speaking about the what was it? Just the ability to not eat the same type of foods.
Yeah, you just can't get away with it. You'll notice foods, generally it's sugary foods that'll cause a lot of inflammation and you'll ache. If you eat foods that maybe are greasy, you'll notice your gallbladder, like you'll have some issues from that. There's just all kinds of problems that you will feel quickly. And what happens when your inflammation goes up? Now your insulin sensitivity can be negatively impacted. So now instead of pushing nutrients into your muscle cells, you're pushing them into your fat cells. So you're getting fatter. But the nutrition stuff becomes of utmost importance for you to feel good when you're training. Because it doesn't feel good, man, when you wake up and everything's hurting and you got to go to the gym. So the training part becomes the nutrition part becomes really, really critical, and the sleep part becomes really, really critical. And it's not even just the amount of hours of sleep, it's the quality of the sleep. But so when you sleep, you go through these sleep cycles. You have, we'll say 5 of them a night. Each sleep cycle is about 90 minutes. And in each sleep cycle, you have a certain amount of sleep that's non-REM, and you have a certain amount of sleep that's REM. Earlier in the night, when you go to bed, most of those sleep cycles are dominated by non-REM sleep. Later in the night, early in the morning, most of those sleep cycles are a little more heavily dominated by REM sleep. Now, the reason why that's important is because, I hear a lot of people go, oh, yeah, you get all your growth hormone release and testosterone, all this cool stuff happens in REM. No, it doesn't. It actually happens in the deeper stages of non-REM. So if you're not getting enough sleep, let's say you're going to bed late, if your sleep cycle is normal, or if you're normally sleeping from, say, I'm just going to make this up, 10 to 6, and if you go to bed at 1, then you miss the first 3 hours and you still have to get up at 6, you just missed a bunch of non-REM sleep. So you missed a lot of that physical rejuvenation. The REM stuff is really good for the mental stuff, cognition, memory, all that stuff. So if you go to bed, on time, but then you get up earlier than you normally would, you miss out on some of the REM sleep. So if your sleep is messed up, you're missing out on a lot of the recovery that now becomes really important as you get older, because you just can't ignore that like you can when you're in your 20s and get away with it. You don't have that margin for error. It's not there. So now all of a sudden you have to learn, you have to get educated on sleeping. I know it sounds crazy, but it sometimes does take a little bit of education on sleeping and how to establish your circadian rhythms and cement them, how to like just general stuff, like don't take a nap at 6 o'clock because it'll impact your ability to sleep. And we could go into why there. You have this stuff called adenosine that builds up in your body. Some people refer to as sleep pressure. The longer you're awake, the more it builds up, and if that in conjunction with your circadian rhythm is what will put you to sleep. So if you take a nap at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, then sleep pressure is gone. That part of the process is gone. So now it's going to be a lot harder for your body to fall asleep. Now it's kind of only relying on the circadian rhythm, but then you get like caffeine in the evening. Caffeine blocks those receptors, the adenosine. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of education. People are quick to just jump on sleep supplements and take a bunch of pills. But if you actually learn about sleep, you can do this without pills and medications for the most part. I mean, some people have to mess around with that stuff, and I certainly have myself. But once you've got it, so now all of a sudden you've been training for 20, 25 years. Now all of a sudden, if you want to get another 10, 20 years out of it, sleep becomes very important. Balanced nutrition becomes very important. Avoiding foods that cause like inflammation that appears almost immediately. Like all those things start to really play into your ability to train effectively and feel good. You might still be able to go to the gym, but now all of a sudden your workouts might be terrible. Maybe you're not getting anything out of them. Maybe you're just kind of going through the motions, as opposed to going in there and really feeling good and putting in good work and enjoying what you're doing.
With the sleep part, I'm more a night owl than I am a morning person. So, I'm missing out on, one rhythm of sleep. But anyhow, there's a give and take to everything. What I wanted to throw out there for people is sleep has become very popular, and it's become, coincidentally very popular with the onset of sleep studies and CPAPs becoming more popular. So it becomes one of those things like, okay, what really is going on? Is this becoming more popular because everybody has to get a CPAP now, or is it more popular? So when you're looking through, and this is just because I did. So when you start looking through how can you sleep better, a few things to keep in mind, and then I'll give you some kind of tips and advice. Is sleeping is something that we've been doing since we've come out of the womb. Actually, beforehand, we've been sleeping since before we were born. So the whole 10,000 hour rule, I think we have that covered as far as our ability to know how to sleep. That's kind of covered. Mm-hmm. But there's stresses and so forth in life. But when you start studying this, like John said, you're going to get very overwhelmed, because you're going to see you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this, you should do this, you should wear these goggles before when you're watching TV. It should be a completely dark room. It should be exactly this temperature. It shouldn't be this temperature. You should take this bath. You should do this. Just guys, you're going to be very, very, very overwhelmed. Keep in mind, it's no different than training, nutrition. Everybody's trying to stand out. Everybody's trying to make their mark. They're just trying to do it in the sleep field. So take the things that make common sense to you and just start with those. For instance, for me, I used to always wake up in the middle of the night. I never really cared that much about it because I used to actually have a shake then, when I was dieting or even just training. Because it was more protein, I was able to slip in. I wake up, take a piss, I'm slamming the shake actually while I'm taking the piss. So the liquid balance in my body was probably the same, but you're asleep, so you don't even know you're pounding the shake. Yeah. And so I kind of got myself into a habit of doing that, but it took me a while to realize I was drinking too late in the night. And when I stopped drinking a couple hours before I went to bed, I stopped waking up in the middle of the night to take a piss, which stopped that disruption. So that one little tiny observation probably made the biggest impact on my complete total sleep, because now it's uninterrupted for the whole entire night. So look at those really simple, low-hanging fruits that you can pick. For me, I need a little bit of carbohydrate before I go to bed. Not a lot, just a little bit. Usually it's like Chex Mix. I'm lactose intolerant, so a little bowl with water and I'm good.
Water? Do you eat Chex with water?
I can't have the milk, so it's
that's
just,
gross.
So it's not bad. It's not as bad as you think. I could mix. Here's the thing: I've tried to mix it with like cashews, like a trail mix. Yeah. But then it doesn't work as well for my sleep. It actually disrupts my sleep for some reason. I don't know if I don't know why. So it's like, fuck it. It's just this. And then the temperature and the mattress. Yeah. The mattress was huge.
I was going to say the temperature was huge for me.
The temperature and the mattress. I would say if you get a mattress that's comfortable, the right temperature, make sure you're not drinking too late before you go to bed. Avoid caffeine. For the half-life of caffeine is pretty long.
Yeah,
it's like what JM said.
5 or 6 hours
is
like
5 or 6 hours.
And that doesn't mean it's all gone. It just means half of it's gone.
The other thing I really got to watch, because I train at night, I cannot do a work set past 10 p.m. and I may go to bed at midnight or 12:30 or 1. If I do anything past 10 p.m.,
going,
it impacts. So that was enough for me. It's like I didn't have to go through this whole down regulation, meditation, avoid the TV, don't look at and there's things I can still remove, like answering the emails right before I go to bed, that kind of crap. And it's not even answering emails, it's just getting rid of the spam. So it's just less spam to wake up to. But I think some people, you see, if you start digging around, you've seen it, it's like, oh my God, I can't do all this.
Oh yeah, there's books and books and books on it.
Yeah, just find the low-hanging fruit and kind of hit from there, and it will make a huge difference. Nutritionally, on the other hand, a lot of the guys listening, or girls, or however you want to identify yourself, they know what foods they shouldn't have. Just don't do it. You know what I'm saying? And some of them are addicting foods. Some of them are foods that we really like. Just know that there's a price. You know, I like sugar, but I can't have it on the day that I'm going to train. I just can't. I mean, it's got to almost be 48 hours away, because it hurts my joints.
I remember,
so bad.
I remember many of the times that we were training, like there were days when your joints hurt, and we could trace it directly to a lot of sugar.
Yeah, it was the sugar. So and I like it. And with that in mind, even sugar-free products, you got to be careful on those, because some will, some won't. You know, I'm cool with the Monster for some reason, but if it was a Diet Coke, hell no. And it may even be the same ingredient for all I know. I just know one causes, one doesn't. But if training longevity is what we're talking about, it's hard to have a good workout or a good training session when your elbows are on fire. I don't care how much liniment you put on or how many knee sleeves that you put on. It's just not going to happen. It's just going to hurt. And as you get older, it's going to hurt anyhow.
You just make it even worse.
It's just going to, you want to, the whole goal here, I think, with the guys who are already beat up is to not make it hurt worse. Like, let's just stay at bay. Like, because you can do that.
Hopefully you've learned how to work around it.
Yeah. And some things you might be able to regress a little bit, especially if your nutrition's really bad, your sleep's really bad. You might be able to, someday wake up and be like, wow, my back doesn't hurt. Cool. Cool.
You can pick a battle that day and work a little harder.
Yeah. Let it go with that. The other thing is stress, so I have my views on, life balance, so you have 2 little ones and you're at a point now where you're really active with them because they're in sports, they can't drive, so how do you do that?
Well, first of all, I love talking about this subject. So this whole notion that you can't have balance in your life is complete and utter bullshit. It's just made up by people who are trying to find excuses to be a shitty human being half the time. Now, you will be hard-pressed to find something that's more obsessive than competitive bodybuilding. That is the utmost pinnacle of self-absorbed obsessiveness. If you can make bodybuilding at a high level work and have a balance of life, you can do it with anything. And what I always heard when I was in my 20s and I really wanted that muscle tech contract because that $3,000 a month was going to make me rich, I always heard, John, you can't work a job and be the best you can be at bodybuilding. You can't train, you'll be too tired. And I just never got it because, and this is all going somewhere, by the way. I just never got it. I never understood it because when I worked at the bank, I thought, this is great. I'm on a schedule. I get up. Bodybuilding is all about discipline and consistency. That's really what it boils down to. Consistent, hard work over a long period of time. So I'm forced to get up and eat breakfast. I have my protein shake at 10 o'clock. I have my lunch at work, and then I have another protein shake at work at 3 o'clock, and I'm in a corporate setting. I can very easily mix a protein shake up and take it into a meeting with me. And then I get home and I have a meal. I go train. I come home and I have my post-workout meal. So I never, it helped me to have discipline. Now, then you throw kids into the mix. Well, this is another really big challenge, especially the first year when they're really little, which was easily, Dave, the hardest year of my life. Easily. Way harder than when I almost died or anything. was very, very challenging. Stress, lack of sleep, etc. So you can't. I think that you can't think of splitting time. You've got to make sure that the time is quality time, because a lot of people say, well, I spend an hour and a half with my kids every night. And, I'll say, well, yeah, that's great. What do you guys do? Well, we sit on the couch and watch TV. I'm like, well, what do you do when you're sitting there? Well, I'm on my phone. I'm answering emails. That's not time with your kids. What is better would be if you go out for 20 minutes and throw a baseball or a football with your kid. Like, to me, the child is going to, that's going to make them feel good, not sitting there when you're not paying attention to them. So number one, the first rule is the time is, don't think about the quantity of the time, think about the quality of the time. Like, make sure you're engaged and you guys are, same thing with a marriage, right? Make sure that you're really engaged and that time is impressed. And now what do you do? You bake stuff into a schedule. That's called prioritizing. So if having a balanced life and your family is important to you, then you put it in your schedule. If it's that hard for you to do that because you're very busy, which is absolutely common, then put it in your schedule, I'm in a very fortunate position now to where I can kind of create my own schedule. It wasn't always like that. But there are certain things that I have in my schedule. Like, for example, it changes by during the time of the year. But we're in August going to start football season. So I'm only doing 1 or 2 appearances in August, September, and October. That's it. Because I'm not going to miss my kids' practices. That is my priority. So you just have to look at your priorities and you have to make time. If you're really busy and you have to work a lot of hours to support your family, I totally understand, but make sure that when you're spending the hour or 2 hours with your kids, make sure that it's quality time. And you're not going to work 7 days a week, hopefully. So what do you do on the day off? You go do stuff with your family half the day or all day. Like, really try to make up for it. That just takes priority. It's just planning and setting priorities. But man, I've seen in bodybuilding, and I'm sure you've seen in powerlifting, people just can't do that, and they just let their family, they just let their lives just fall apart. I mean, I've seen it over and over and over and over. And I'm not saying all the doing that stuff I just said is easy, but when you kind of start practicing it, it just becomes like when you wake up, you don't say, I wonder if I'm going to train today. No, I'm just going to train. There is no decision-making process. The balance stuff, should be the same thing. You don't go, wonder if I should spend some time with my kids today. You don't do that. You just do it. You bake it into your life so that's a part of your life. And that's kind of the magic formula to me. It's just making it a priority and making sure the time is quality time and just sticking to it.
I'll add to that. I don't think you're going to disagree with anything that I'm going to say, but I'm going to challenge the quality time, but not really with quantity time. But the reason why I think the balance is, I think balance is a terrible term.
Yeah,
it's a terrible term for this, because balance of what?
Yeah.
Because to me, when you say balance, I'm assuming something that's...
It's like 50-50, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's more entities involved here.
Yeah.
There's
more than 1 and 2.
Hell yeah. I mean, there's...
That's a great point.
There's 5, 6, possibly.
A great point.
If you put faith in there, you're throwing another one.
Yep.
So you got a lot of different things that play a role there, where to hit on one thing that you said that I agree with, is when to go back to the guys that are in that prime or trying to go all in with the sport, or as JM and I talked about, that say they'll do whatever it takes. Rarely will they ever do whatever it takes, because if you really push them, would you kill somebody? You know what I'm saying? I mean, let's really answer that question.
Yeah.
Or is this just a phrase of whatever it takes within what boundary?
Mm-hmm.
Well, where's that boundary? All right. Where I start to get into that is I understand making something a top priority, which you did with bodybuilding, I did with powerlifting. That doesn't mean there aren't other priorities. there is number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. I was working on an education. I was working on always trying to have, I think there's been 2 weeks in my entire life I've been unemployed since I was 12. So always looking, if I didn't have a job, I was looking for a job, then taking whatever job I had, no matter how shitty it was, just because that was an important value of mine. And trying to build some foundation of something. I didn't know what it was going to be, for when the powerlifting was done, because it's, like I said, it was first. But I was smart enough to realize at some point it's going to be done, and I'm going to have something.
Yeah.
To not have anything underneath that, to me, is just ignorance and stupidity.
Yeah.
Because there's no degree of intelligence to be able to think that either one of any strength sport is going to provide you enough for retirement. There's none. All right. And then now if you throw a family in there, it's irresponsibility.
Yeah.
So it's gone beyond ignorance and stupidity, but now you're just irresponsible.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing, there is time. I mean, how long? Bodybuilding takes a lot more time than powerlifting. All right. How much time does powerlifting really take? At the most 4 hours, 4 days a week, maybe 5 days a week. I mean, we're talking a part-time job here.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of other time. So I think that's an important thing to put out there, because as well as I do, the number of people that just do that, then they go home and play video games.
Oh yeah.
All right. They're wasting time that they could read a book.
Right.
They could learn a skill online.
Oh yeah.
They don't even need to move. And I understand sometimes when you're dieting, you can't move. I get that. I've been there, not to the same degree, but I've sat in the chair for 2 hours having to really take a piss, but not wanting to get up to take the piss.
Yeah.
But I'm still watching TV, right?
Yeah.
I could be watching a TED Talk. I could be watching something to educate
Right.
myself. But going back to the quality thing, I think it's more of engagement. Like when you're with your kids and it's time that's with your kids, are you engaged? And that's kind of what you said. They're sitting there watching TV. Okay, that's great, but are you engaged? Are you having a communication? Are you talking about the show? If there's something in the show that's interesting, did you talk,
Right.
Or better yet, take them outside, do that. But I'm in a podcast with you right now. I'm engaged with you. I don't care what they're doing. I don't care what they're doing. I'm right here, with you. So if it's friendship, something that you value, then I'm going to be engaged with you and not let you think that I'm thinking about other shit I have to do later today or work or whatever it is. And in this hour, 2 hours or whatever it's going to be, I just spent time with Dave.
Yeah.
All right. And that means a hell of a lot more than zero time or us just hanging out, watching fucking every episode of Breaking Bad, what I'm saying from that standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, from the quality standpoint, I've changed my view on that a little bit because my oldest son is autistic. So I'm always there when he comes home from school. So he gets off the bus. Well, it's summertime now. So say he gets off the bus at 3, 4 o'clock. I'm there. He may walk in and go straight to his room, take a nap, and I may not see him for 2 hours. Like yourself, I can work almost anywhere. I mean, I have to spend some time in the office, but for most part, 60% of my work is done at home. Now, maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, he's going to come up after his nap and he's going to sit down on the couch and we're going to talk. All right. So I have to invest maybe 20, 30 hours for that 1 hour conversation. I'll do that any day of the week because if I wasn't there, that never would have happened.
Right.
And this is an extreme example, okay? A very extreme example, which most people don't have to contend with. But I think they would find even with their spouses, their girlfriends or wives or significant others, if they were actually just there, when they're communicating, say having dinner or whatever it is, and actually communicating, a half hour of that or an hour of that in their mind, and even in your mind, is worth 40 hours.
It goes a long ways.
It goes a long way because you're just there.
Yeah.
So here, now I'm going to really fuck with them, right? Now we're really going to fuck with those people out there that are listening. What's a better training session? one that you're actually engaged in the session and you're focused, like you finish the set, now you're focusing on what the next set's going to be. Now we have to go back to when we were in our prime, because that's not the case now. It's fun. We're trying to have fun, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to check our phone. We're going to fuck around. We're going to have fun. But when you're training and it's serious, you ain't checking shit on your phone.
Yeah.
You know, you do the set, you're resting, you're getting your breath, you're doing the next set. The more engaged you are, was that not a better training session?
Yeah.
Significantly
100%.
better.
Yeah, 100%.
Why would that not be the same with kids, faith, you know, and all these other factors?
Yeah.
You know, and so that's where the balance thing, I think balance is a bad word.
Yeah, you're right. It's just a shitty
I think
term.
it's engagement. Be better engaged at the things that are important to your life.
Yeah.
All right. And don't take them for granted.
Yeah.
Because they could be gone.
Yeah.
You know, they can be gone in a heartbeat.
100%.
I mean, we're old enough now that we've all lost people, lost people. It's boom, boom,
Gone.
fuck.
Yeah.
You know, why didn't I call? You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Here's the really interesting thing is I don't know how long, we're like an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes into this thing yet, talking about longevity of training, and have not yet spoke about training. So that's a huge take-home point, because what we've talked about is the nutritional aspect, the stress aspect, the relationship aspect, the recovery aspect, the sleep aspect. All these things matter, but they don't just matter to the training, but they matter to everything else, you know, because it all becomes kind of full circle.
Right.
There's another factor I'm going to throw out there, then we'll get to the training, okay? The other factor, and people can define this however they want to define it, I'm always clear about that, is you have to have some degree of faith for all this to work. Mm-hmm. So the way that I like to define that before people blow up the internet, and you know, it's to me it's terrible that you even have to define what it is, but people have different different religious beliefs, and that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm just talking about is the faith in that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
That no matter what happens, and bad shit happens, and we're old enough that really bad shit happens, and you know what? It's going to keep happening.
Yeah.
And even worse things are going to happen. We got kids and wife.
Yeah.
Even worse things are going to happen, which can be very fucking depressing to think about. But if you have the faith that knowing that things are going to be okay, that is huge. To me, I think that trumps all of this.
Yeah.
You know, that just to have some degree of faith is huge.
Yeah.
So your turn, your thoughts on that one, because I know you've went, you know, from a religious side, you know, I don't want to say full circle, but you know,
I mean,
gone through a few.
Definitely some changes over
the years. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
That we don't need to talk about the religious part. I don't want to do that. I I just want to talk about that faith aspect of it, because I saw that change happen in you throughout the training process, where all of a sudden it wasn't about things that were nagging, it was hurting. It was more about, man, this is so cool that I'm able to do this, and I can do, you know, so that all changed. So I'd love to hear your point of view on how that goes into this whole process of longevity.
Well, you know, if you don't have, let's look at it from both perspectives. If you don't have any faith in anything, you're probably going to be pretty cynical. You're probably going to have maybe a little bit negative view of things. And what happens when you're always in that negative mindset, that maybe not even negative, it's kind of just like a hopeless, well, I'm just here, I'm just a speck of dirt, nothing really matters. You know, I have these quadrants of emotion that I read from a sports psychologist that I've adopted, that I really, really like this concept. And basically, there's 4 quadrants of emotion. There's one where it's a positive state and you have a lot of energy. This is when you feel good, you feel confident, you're energized. And then there's a positive state where you're more relaxed, you're content, you're happy. And then there's 2 negative states. One of them is It's a high energy negative state where you're mad, you're aggressive, you're angry. And then there's the low energy negative state where you're just pessimistic. And I feel like you end up in that quadrant of emotion when you really don't have a lot of faith in anything. And that just saps energy from you. It takes away not only from your recovery, but it takes away just from the quality of your life.
Would you say that increases cortisol?
Absolutely increases cortisol, because you're always sitting there and you're ruminating. You're thinking about, I wish I'd have done this, I wish I'd have done that. Or it's just a negative view on life. People suck, everybody sucks, everybody's out for themselves. There's nothing, like, life sucks.
Real quickly explain what cortisol is to the listeners so they.
Yeah, I mean, it's cortisol itself is not a bad thing. It's just simply a hormone. It's a stress hormone that's secreted, and it liberates energy. So it liberates fuel for energy. It's a fight or flight hormone, so it actually serves a good purpose. The problem is that when it's not acutely raised, but when it's chronically raised, so it's always high. And that's when you start seeing things like insulin resistance. Your adrenals tend to get a little overworked. Things like that. You have sleep disturbances. So sleep disturbances, poor insulin sensitivity.
Weight loss is going to become an issue.
Weight loss, and just
weight loss becoming an issue.
Well, you can lose muscle.
Yes, you lose muscle. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have all these things happening when you're in this quadrant. So there's two positive quadrants. There's high energy and low energy, and there's two negative quadrants, high energy and low energy.
So we were speaking about the one that saps you.
Yeah, and that's
energy.
the low energy negative quadrant. And I feel like people that don't have a lot of faith can kind of live in that. Whereas if you have some faith, sometimes you can, guess what? You go up to the high energy or the low energy positive, where you're content. You're like, you know what? Business sucked this year, but
it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's all right. And actually you taught me a lot of that, business-wise. So a lot of that is how you were raised. It's your internal values. It's who you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with people in this quadrant down here, what do you think you're going to be? You're going to be one of those people. I've never met somebody who's a high energy positive person who surrounds themselves with low energy negative people. I've never seen that happen before, and I doubt I ever will. So faith is it's a way for you to just stay in kind of that positive low energy where you're recovering, you're building up positivity, you feel better, you're content, you just have a better life. Other people around you see it, you impact other people. So that's just kind of one of my views of looking at faith and just knowing that things are going to be okay. If that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. I probably live in that quadrant far more. It's hard for me to move to the left.
Yeah.
To be that high energy. Now in the gym, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm that high energy asshole, but it's a fun asshole, but it's. This
could be a real interesting conversation, because the high energy negative can actually be channeled positively for short periods of time. It's when you're constantly like that's where it can really drain.
Oh yeah, you can't live like that.
You can't
my God.
But some people do. But I think some people do try to live like that.
I know they do.
So that's a whole nother.
Could you imagine that? Taking that gym animal, right?
And just live.
And going to Kroger. You know what I'm saying?
What do you mean $1.99
what
a
the
pound?
fuck? What do you mean there's no Rice Krispie treats?
Do people live like that? People live like that. I think you made me think about somebody pulling up on the McDonald's drive-thru and they told them they were out of chicken nuggets. So the lady was reaching and trying to grab her and punch her because they were out of chicken nuggets. Yeah, people live in that quadrant, man. And but I like to self-awareness is huge. I don't think people have enough self-awareness. And if you understand those quadrants, you can say to yourself, where am I at? Like right now, I'm in between. I'm in a positive area, and I'm somewhere in between. I'm in a little bit of both right now. I feel energized because I'm connecting. I'm talking to a friend. I also feel just very content because I like what I'm doing with my life. Now, that could change. I've got to go. Do you remember the last time I came? I hit a tire blew off of a semi, and it screwed my car up. I still don't have my car back. And how long ago was that?
Oh, wow.
6-7 weeks?
Wow.
So when I leave here, I'm headed there. They said my car is finally done.
Cool.
So when I get in there, I'm not sure what quadrant I'm going to be in, but I might end up in that angry one.
Yeah.
So, but self-awareness, so knowing where you're at. And if you know you're in one of these negative quadrants, you can say, why am I here? You can identify it. Okay, now that I'm here in this quadrant, now that I've identified why I'm here, is there a game plan to get me out of there? Or do I just recognize I'm here and I don't want to be here? A lot of times people end up in those negative quadrants because their needs aren't being met too, just generally in life. Whether it's companionship or whatever, it just puts them in a certain mood. So what are my needs in life? Well, one of my needs is spending time with my kids. So I haven't spent any time with my kids for 2 weeks. Maybe that's a problem. Maybe that's why I'm down here. My needs aren't being met. Mm-hmm. So when you're self-aware and you understand where you're at, you can say, okay, some needs not being met, or think about the things that make me happy. I'm not doing those things, or what have you, but that self-awareness is so key, I think, to kind of keeping in that positive state more often than not, because you should be there as much as you can.
Yeah, I like this conversation because this is going to allow me to actually kind of detail something that every Friday night on Instagram I do an AMA, where I answer questions, the little question box. And every time I've done one since I've started doing them, and there's I don't know how many now, it's thousands of questions, I always get asked what's a regret, from all of it. And my regret's always the same. It's never changed. And it's how I treated my wife when I was still competing, or for me, it was even after I competed, because it's an identity change, because it's all you do. Well, I didn't actually come to terms with the change. I just kind of, and this is nothing bad about Justin in any way whatsoever. I just happened to meet Justin Harris and ended up making a change into a pivot of seeing how shredded I could become following a carb cycling diet and doing everything associated with that. So just taking one obsession to another one, which actually ended up being a worse one because it takes more time out of the day.
Yeah,
right?
By far.
All right. So mentally, I never made that change. So I was still putting myself in my training and everything else first. And the Kroger story made me remember this. I remember that it was a high carb day, and a super high carb day was fats as close to zero as possible, because there were other agents involved, so I don't condone this by any means whatsoever, but insulin was involved. Okay, so there's super, super high carbs and insulin, which he did not tell me to do, by the way. It's just insulin was involved in the process, because there's 1,000 grams of carbs, 1,200 for me, that we were shuttling, into a 250-pound frame. That's a fuckload of glycogen that you're pushing into there. I went to grab the pancake mix out of the pantry. And this fucking pancake mix, John, it had 2 grams of fat per serving. Damn. And I lost my shit. I was mad as fuck. It's like, I told you it had to have 0 grams of fat. It's right now. I told you and just blew up, just not hitting, just I wouldn't even say it's just verbal abuse, but just thinking back on it, it's like, you know what? This is the shit that I did for a decade. All right, this is how I made her feel. And I have I'll never forgive myself. Well, I have forgiven myself, but I'll never forget for that, because that almost destroyed my relationship forever. Not the pancake mix itself, but the behavior. Yeah. Because that was just one instance that I looked back on that I can remember very vividly, because I was no longer competing anymore. So it's easier to see. All the other ones I can't even see because it's a blur. Because you look back on it now and you're like, really? Was that really worth, this big fucking disruption and huge fight over 2 grams of fat? Really? It was only 2 meals out of the 10 that day. 4 grams of fat could have ended my marriage forever.
36 calories
almost
for 2 meals.
Did. You know what I'm saying? But that's that quadrant. But I think not having that self-awareness, going back to what you were saying during that time period, and that's not an excuse. I was an asshole. But, had I been a little more self-aware, may not have been as
Yeah,
bad.
you would have caught yourself. You'd have said,
Yeah.
"No, wait a minute."
Yeah, so I hate that we keep going back to the prime training age. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that's where I think these guys really should listen, because you can destroy the shit out of your life in pursuit of a goal, and it doesn't have to happen.
That's right.
It doesn't have to happen. I don't care what anybody says.
I agree.
It doesn't. I know too many people that have excelled. And think about it this way. If you had that faith and you did these things that we're talking about lifestyle-wise, were present, communicated, and did that with the significant other or the spouse, okay? We all think that we're in this alone, right? Because they are individual sports. We do have somebody with us along the ride.
Yep.
But we keep them in the back seat.
Yeah.
What if they were riding sidekick,
Makes no
man?
sense at all when you think
If they're
about
riding sidekick, that's your biggest fan.
it. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Your biggest fan that can offer something nobody else will, unconditional love.
Yeah.
So your biggest fan that can offer unconditional love, you put that with training right and all the other stuff, I'm telling you, you're beating the person that says that they're all in and is willing to do everything.
1,000%.
You're
Yeah.
beating them.
1,000%.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. So this whole thing of don't be surprised if you're not willing to go all in the day that you're standing on the stage and you got a second place trophy. That's bullshit.
Yeah. 100%, man.
That's bullshit. That's a lie. Now, training wise, finally.
Oh, this is
after
the
where
easy
we
stuff.
at? We're almost 2 hours in.
No,
But
this is 5 minutes.
yeah, exactly. I mean, this shows you the importance of all the other stuff, because you got to be able to recover from the training.
Yeah.
So what have you found training wise? Because it's you say you're in maintenance mode, but you still want to make gains, right?
Yeah.
But
And I still train really hard.
and you're not trying to downsize.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit, but
I'm trying to maintain.
you're trying to maintain.
Yeah.
Where other bodybuilders will downsize. So I think people are going to relate more to the training aspect that you're going to talk about, because you're trying to maintain. Jay and some of the other guys that are downsizing, that's a whole different story, because they're purposely trying to.
And actually, Jay is like, I just saw him a couple weeks ago. He's actually maintaining, man. He's
maintaining fairly good.
Yeah,
well, he's
there's-
still not what he was.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because I feel like maintaining muscle is so much easier than building it. I mean, everybody who comes to stay with me or spends any length of time with me, they're amazed at how little I eat. I eat very little. I eat 2 eggs for breakfast and 2 pieces of toast. I probably have 100 grams of protein a day. It used to be 150. Now it's down to probably 100. I just don't eat a lot. And I notice that when I don't train, like when I go to a seminar, like I was just in England, I didn't train for 3 days because we were speaking. I can see myself getting small quick. But as soon as I start training hard, it comes back. And the harder I train, the better I look. In the last 2 weeks, I've actually trained really hard. And like I've seen a lot of my leg size, for example, come back, and even some of my chest size. So for the purpose of this discussion, longevity, I can't quite handle all the hard sets we used to do. I have to be much more strategic. Like you and I used to do a drop set on squats, then a drop set on leg press, then a drop set on hack squat, then a drop set on stiff-legged deadlift, and then we started all that with drop sets on leg curls. I can't do that now. I mean, I could, but I probably wouldn't be able to train again for a long period of time. And I like to be in the gym all the time. 5 days a week, I like to be in the gym. So now I like to still maintain that intensity, but I can't do it as often. And to go back what we were talking about earlier in this conversation, now you have to just say, okay, this exercise may not be the best choice for me today. Maybe I need to find something else. And it's amazing to me how people are so reluctant to just give up an exercise for a while and do something else. These people beat this mantra, like you got to do the same stuff day in and day out. I mean, you could have a really good conversation with how that actually creates injuries, the same motor patterns all the time, very few. You could have that conversation, but just from a longevity perspective, Dave, I think it's almost as simple as when something doesn't feel right, toss your ego aside and find something else to do. And then if you want to excel or maintain, you still have to have that level of effort, that intensity, but you just got to be careful. You got to use it wisely. Like you can't go nuts all the time, every set. You just got to sprinkle it in intelligently. You got to figure out what you can recover from. So if I'm telling someone you still got to use a lot of intensity, I can only give them the amount that they can recover from. Because if I give them more than they can recover from, that's stupid. They're just going to get worse. So it's exercise selection, it's exercise sequencing. You and I have talked about that. There's absolutely no reason why I should walk in the gym and start off with squats now. Just no reason for it. So it's how you're sequencing, like elbows. How many guys have torn up, destroyed elbows from doing heavy skull crushers? Would make no sense for you or I to come in here and do heavy skull crushers first. Both of us would be paying for that the next day in our elbows. But people don't want to give that stuff up because they think it's hardcore, and that's manly, right? But as long as you're annihilating the muscle, as long as you're loading it, as long as you're doing quality reps and you're fatiguing the fibers, I mean, what else is there when it comes to bodybuilding? That's what you do. It's just loading the fibers, having to do hard sets, and fatiguing the fibers. I mean, that's literally it. And so I think the training piece is just so much easier than all the other stuff we're talking about. It's just a matter of being able to think, be creative in some cases, to not lose your intensity, but to use it judiciously.
What about the frequency?
Frequency to me, so first of all, when people want to do high frequency, I always ask them, why do you want to do it? So anytime, any training program you have, you should have a reason why you want to train that way. So for me, when I hear frequency, there are valid reasons to have higher frequency. So for me, high frequency is doing a body part 3 times a week or more. That's high frequency. I think 2 times a week is, like there was a time when you could say that was high frequency. Remember when we used to train body part 1 time
Once
a week?
a week, yeah.
2 times a week, you could probably say is high frequency. But for me, it's 3 times a week, 4 times a week. So why would you even do that? So you would do it to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, which lasts for, we'll just say 4 to 8 hours. So you could target the muscle more often, create that response. But you have to have your intensity in line to do that, because if you're training real intensely and you create a lot of muscle protein breakdown and soreness, if the muscle is sore and it's damaged, it can't produce as much force, like you're going backwards. You will end up overtrained. So now you got to look at your training program. So man, all those sets you were talking about doing, those hard sets, boy, now maybe I can't do all those. Now maybe it's just 1 exercise, or it's 2 instead of 3 or 4. Now maybe instead of 4 all-out sets, it's only 2 all-out sets, or maybe even 1. So you have to program. A lot of people, Dave, what they do is they go, oh, I'm going to try high frequency. And I go, okay, what are you going to do different? I'm just going to train more often. You going to do the same stuff? Yeah, I'm just going to add in extra sessions. That's probably not going to end well for you. But that's what people do. They don't go, okay, well, it's high frequency. Now I need to recover. So now I've got to adjust these. We know things like slow negatives. We know things like lengthened positions, like a fly. We know those things create more muscle damage. So now in your programming, you got to think, maybe I shouldn't do so much of the heavy, slow, eccentric stuff. Maybe I shouldn't do an excessive amount of really heavy lengthened stuff, like a fly or a stiff-legged deadlift. Now you got to start thinking about, there's a lot of factors. So if you think about that and you control all those variables and you set up your program right, then high frequency is very valid. You're stimulating the muscle more often. It's great. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just you got to program intelligently for it, if that's what you want to do. Or you have the opposite. Someone's doing high frequency and they say, I'm getting a little tired of this. I want to go to a split where I hit the body part once every 5 days. Okay, now that style that you were using is probably not intense enough, because you're going to be recovered in 2 days, but then you're not going to be training for another 2 or 3 days. So now what's happening? Nothing. Nothing positive is happening. Everything is going down. So the whole talk around frequency is, whether it's good or bad, is not a good. I mean, it's a good conversation, but it's kind of a dumb one. You just got to look at how. The better question would be, if I'm going to train with high frequency, how do I build my program? If I'm going to train with lower frequencies, then how do I build that program? That's really where the discussion should be. So for the purposes of longevity, training the muscle more often, can you do it? Sure. You just got to build the program right. That's all. You don't, and then again, exercise selection. Does it make sense to squat 4 times a week if you're 47 years old like me? Probably not the best selection to do that. So then you got that factor too.
From the powerlifting side or pure strength side, which is where I've been for the last few years, some of the takeaways that I've learned is, my best days are behind me. So some of the rules that I kind of follow, and these are my rules. Some of these rules have been taught to me through, orthopedics, through physical therapists, and just other meatheads that have been around for a long time. I try to avoid any movement that I know how strong I really am at from my best days. Right? I don't want to be reminded, of that, where I really am. Yeah. That's one of the things that I do. And my joint history is bad, so I have to put that out there. There's 2 replaced hips, there's a shoulder that needs replaced, there's arthritis, there's degenerative bone issues going on, there's all kinds of things that are going on. A lot genetically related would be the first cause. The second cause would be my body weight being over 240 since I was 15 years old. Third being training related. As John kind of touched on a little bit, when you're a powerlifter, you're still doing the same movement patterns, even though slight fluctuations can make a huge difference in the joint. Just a finger change on a grip on a bench press can make a big difference. So, but it's still kind of the same movement patterns. So with that all in mind, because a lot of the people that do reach out to me want to know how they can keep training when they're fucked up. Well, I have to preface this by saying, see an orthopedic surgeon, see a physical therapist, because I am neither, nor am I able to speak as this is being part of my scope of practice, as it's not. I can tell you my story. That's all I can do, is to tell you my story of what I have found has worked for me. For me, restricted range movements on the joints that are the worst has been one of the greatest things that I've ever done. The shoulder saver pad for the bench press, for example, which is essentially the same thing as a 2-board press without having the weight displaced throughout the board. So there's still more joint stabilization. And when I do the restricted range, I determine the range by where my threshold of pain is. So I will go to where the pain is just with a barbell. It's like, okay, there's the pain. Then I move about 5 degrees out of threshold. So I'm away from the pain. And then that's where my working range becomes. I'm not going to work through the pain. I have no meat coming up in 12 weeks. I have no peak. I have nothing that I'm training for. All right, so that's why you'll see things like the spider bar box squats that I do that are on a higher box. I have prosthetics, so I'm staying in the safest range I can possibly be without putting excess force on the joint, which is artificial, in its most vulnerable position, which is going to be at a 90-degree or lower position. If my knee was to come in that position, there would be a problem. I also use a lot of accommodating resistance, if it's reverse band or chain, because when I'm in that bottom position, just through the strength curve is when there's the greatest stress on the joint.
Yeah.
I want to lower the stress where it's the greatest on the joint, but I want to increase the stress where the joint is at its greatest point of stability, which is at the top. So if you take the spider bar squat, which I troll myself when I post on Instagram, you'll see there's a boatload of weight, but you're also going to see there's bands or chains, so there's something that's deloading it at the bottom. So I'm overloading it at the top for the ability for the joint to stabilize. Just me standing up, the joint and body has to stabilize the joint. Then it's being deloaded to a point at the bottom, which is away and out of threshold, and then back up. You got to always remember, your joint has to stabilize before it can absorb force, before it can produce force. These are common rules in physical therapy and just training in general. So I'm playing into those rules in my exercise selection. I do max effort work, and the reason I do the max effort work is because It's actually easier on your heart. People will disagree, but when you're dealing with the mitral valve, you're pumping a lot of blood in, and it only comes out once. It's 1 rep. Now, granted, there's other shit that goes on in the heart, which that can create great strain and probably blow your heart up. So I'm picking my battles, based upon chambers of the heart, I suppose. But that 1 rep is not going to be as problematic, and it's also not going to be as I've always seen more injuries on a 3 rep set, 5 rep set, 10 rep set than I've ever seen on a single. The only injuries I've ever seen on a single usually are in a meet, and that's because of meet conditions, competitive environments, lifting more than they're actually capable of lifting, or in a gym, somebody doing something just stupid as fuck. Usually the injury comes out of nowhere. Like, man, I was just doing a normal set of 315 and pop, my fucking pec, I don't know why it popped on 7. I can do this shit for 20. That's typically, you rarely see it happen on something that's heavy, assuming that you have experience and know how to get tight, you know how to brace. The reason for this is you are getting tight and you are bracing and you're preparing your body for the force. Where if you're normally doing a set of 10, most of the time you're just going to take it out, you're going to do a set of 10. You're not really thinking about all that. Now, I'm doing the max effort work because of the joint health. I want the joint to maintain the most bone density I can, weight, right? And to stabilize the force. So I have to pick my battles. So I got something for a pressing movement, something for a squatting movement. And for me, the deadlift, I've never liked it to begin with. And it's not a happy movement for me. So I don't do it. I haven't done it for years, and if I do, it's going to be like what we used to do. It's going to be something with a whole lot of chain for just a couple reps. Once I get through that main movement, then training economy becomes huge for me. It's like, I'm not interested in getting bigger. Yes, like most people, I would like to lose weight, but like yourself, I don't eat a lot, and I do that because I feel better. But I've created a bad situation to where my maintenance calorie level is really low. So if I was to start dieting, I'm going to have a problem in 10 weeks. If I'm at 2,200 calories average, that's not good. I would have to reverse diet up. And I do have plans to do all that, so that's all in the works, because I don't want to continue weighing 275, 280 pounds. But this is the tricky part. I also know how long it takes. So that mental aspect comes in, like, okay, this is going to do it right. It's going to take some time.
Just 1 more week.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I do is with each joint that I have a problem with, which is almost all of them, I'll pick an exercise towards the end of the session, which is, if it's my shoulder, it's going to be a machine fly. It's going to be a stabilized exercise. It's not going to be a dumbbell fly. It's going to be a machine fly, cable fly, something that I can actually have the joint stabilized with the help of a machine or a cable or even somebody, holding the joint. And I will let it come back to threshold and then come out of threshold by 5 degrees and then just pull it over. And just do very slow, like 4 very slow negative reps, not at 100% intensity, maybe 60% intensity. Because a lot of what happens with joint issues is the restricted range of motion, a lot of it's coming from muscle inhibition. Your muscle's saying, fuck you, stop. So it stops. So I don't want to completely take that away because it is a protective mechanism. But I do want to make sure that doesn't progressively get worse and worse and worse and worse, because then it becomes more and more and more frozen. This is something I wish I knew before it got stuck here. Because I could have started doing it from the very beginning and not had the frozen shoulder problem. So I'll do the 4 negatives, and then I will do an iso hold at the end of the last repetition, or it will just be a completely another set where it's just going to be a 30, 60, a 90 count iso hold just shy of threshold. Threshold, again, meaning pain. Pain's not good. Stay out of pain. Don't go into the pain thinking it's going to help, because, guys, when you're doing iso holds or isometrics or anything that's some type of yielding movement or isometric against force, that's going to work that muscle 10 degrees plus or minus whatever range of motion you're in. So if I'm just 5 degrees short of threshold, I'm working 5 degrees into pain without having to go into pain. And I'm working, so I'm getting where I need to be to strengthen it in case something weird happened. My arm gets stuck getting out of the car, and it pulls it a little funky.
Yeah.
Well, it's not going to tear anything because I've actually strengthened it beyond threshold without ever having to go there. So that's kind of my finisher work, is those eccentrics and then the iso holds from that. And then just very, very general stretching work, which it's not old football stretching, but it's again, right to threshold and getting the fuck out.
Yeah.
And just staying there. And out of all the things that I've been shown over the years, and, every exercise, every corrective movement, every therapeutic modality, all these different things, nothing yet has trumped those things. Nothing's come close.
Yeah.
And those things I've been doing since my shoulder first needed replaced in 2004, and it still has the same range of motion that it had then. It still is it the same as far as pain. It's not gotten any worse. And for it to be how many years later, almost 15 years later, from needing replacement due to bone spurs, and I still have more bone spurs in it. I have it checked every few years. It's worse. The degree of damage in it's worse. But the pain's not, and the range of motion's not.
Yeah.
So had I known some of these things, thanks to the bigger ones that I talked about at the end, the threshold, the range of motion, stretching, iso holds, that's Danny Overcash, was somebody that taught me that. And I mean, we're talking somebody that's half my age. She's got a PhD in physical therapy, but just because we're older, guys, don't think you can't learn,
Oh, hell yeah.
from those that are younger, because, their area of expertise is in a different area. But sometimes you have to get these people out of the clinic, into your environment, or they need to come up through your environment, because you're going to toss around ideas that if you try to do it with your orthopedic, he's really got no choice other than to say no.
Yeah.
Because he's liable.
Right. He's
So
not.
get him out of that environment, build trust. Like, I have trust with my doctor, all right? And I can tell it's Eric Serrano. I can tell Eric anything. I'm not going to lie to Eric, right? I know he's going to jump my shit. I know he's going to yell at me, but I also know he has all the information he needs.
Yeah. Right.
All right. And if I don't tell him, he's still going to know. He's just got his ways. He knows too many of us. I get a text the other day. You're drinking fucking Monster drinks. What am I going to say? No, it's on fucking camera. And I'm like, well, the caffeine is only like 135. I mean, the caffeine's really not bad.
Yeah.
And, he's like, it's not the caffeine. And I'm like, okay. So we go back and forth on that whole thing. But you can't hide. If he's your patient, you can't hide from Eric. It's just the way it is. But when you need to get a hold of him, good luck with that too. So you know how that works.
He's a busy man.
Yeah. So from that powerlifting side, or that pure strength side, the other aspect, the other big thing is, there has been, I've had health issues over the past couple of years. There's sometimes you'll be put on meds, and John's had intestinal issues and been on certain meds. There's certain meds that will fuck you up, just guaranteed. If that's the case, then, hey, look, if all you can do is get in the gym once every 2 weeks, then get in the gym once every 2 weeks. The only thing that I do, and I have the personal luxury of this because the gym is part of the office, is I walk into the gym every day and I grab a barbell. I just want to feel the knurling.
Yeah.
Because my fear is, and there's been times, the longest I had to go was 8 weeks, I think, without any lifting at all. And that was my last tip. I got scared. Maybe I'm never going to walk in there again. You don't know.
Not a good thought.
You take it away for 2 months. You know, your life begins to change. Things begin to change. But I can walk in and grab the bar, and it's like, I'm going to be back in here, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, so that always helps. But if you're in a position to where your health is, you know, you need to take care of your health first. You know, as Eric told me at one point, actually a couple of points, your blood work matters more than your training. Let's get this right. Then we'll talk about your training. And then a couple of months later, it's like, okay, we'll talk about the training. Your health matters more than your training. So if your health is off and you have to go on some meds which are going to make you weak as fuck or tired as fuck, and that's what you have to do, then do what you have to do for your health. The training will always be there. You know, it can always come back.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said about the accommodating resistance, because not only for powerlifters but for bodybuilders, it's a tremendous help. And the bodybuilding community, you know, I've been trying to educate them on bands and chains since I learned it all from you and Louie, but they're very resistant. You know, they look at a band and they think, what's making it easier? They don't understand the strength curve. They don't understand. But anyways, I don't think I need to belabor the point there, but that's a great point. And the other thing is, when you started talking about your range of motion, working in the right range of motion, there are two things that popped into my mind right when you said that. Your machine flies and your hack squats. Like you would always take those, okay, let me see how far I can go. So you were always trying to keep your range of motion. In addition to working in the smart range of motion, you were always trying to do exercises to ensure you had the best range of motion. You did that on your hack squats too. You'd go down to a certain point, you'd go, okay, I can go down all the way to here. Then there would be weeks where it'd be like, okay, I can go a little lower now.
Yes, it does change. I'm glad you brought that up. It does change. Yeah. It does change.
Yeah,
and inflammation is why.
Yeah, the more inflamed, the worse that feels.
Sugar.
So you made me think about that. And then what I do when I train is I save my last movement for something where there's a really full range of motion. And I'm not necessarily thinking about turning muscle spindles off, like you said, but that's also a great point and benefit. But I was just thinking, you know, there's muscular building benefits, but also for your joints, they love going through a full range of motion as best they can.
Yes.
And I think that's best served toward the end of a workout when everything's warmed up, everything's moving.
I agree 100%, because the more blood you can put in there, because it's still, the overreaching factor here is still wear and tear, all right? That's the movement of the joint, you know, over a period of time. Some things are more joint friendly than other things, okay? Some things you can do ultra high reps on, and it's okay. You know, it's joint friendly. But other things, you know, where you're dealing with a long lever arm, you know, like
like a preacher curl.
Or if somebody's got bad hips and they're doing a lot of swinging leg raises. Yeah. Right? You know, they're doing it to try to loosen their hips up. One of the worst fucking things they can do if they have an impinged hip with a lot of arthritis. Yeah. That's terrible wear and tear. You know, that's just over and over and over, but they feel better after they do it. Yeah. But they actually did more damage than they did good. But I think that there's some specificity in here. You know, my joints are trashed. Now, my joints that aren't trashed, my last set's going to kind of resemble kind of more what you're talking about, just pumping the shit and putting as much blood in there, almost like a finisher, you know, to make sure that's full of nutrients, you know, to be able to heal and to pump, not just into the muscle, but into, you know, the joint, and trying to get into the tendons and ligaments are really, the blood flow there is very limited. You know, it's not like pumping a muscle up. Yeah, it's a completely different process. It takes tons of repetitions, especially for tendons. Yeah. You know, ligaments almost have, I may, if I could be wrong, it may have no blood flow at all. It's got to have some, I suppose, because a bone has some. But it's not much. I mean, you fuck a ligament up, it's going to take a long time to heal. Yeah. You know, tendon's going to take not as much time. Muscle's going to take less time. I think bone actually heals faster than muscle. So it's better to break a bone than it is to actually tear a muscle, if you really want to think about it. And it's probably better, too, because it will make your ass rest.
Yeah, you don't have any choice.
Because you can't move. Let's hit a couple questions, since I think we covered probably almost anything anybody was going to ask. But
No, there's a ton of good questions. One of them from the YouTube community was Dave and John. How did you guys meet each other, and when did you start training together? So whoever wants to start with.
I'll take that. John used to train at Westside for a short period of time, and one of his off seasons going back into the 90s, I believe.
95, 96. Actually, 94, 95.
Can you talk about your time at Westside briefly there, John?
Yeah. I wanted to build my upper body up because my legs were way ahead of my upper body, and Mike Francois was going there as well. And I always liked powerlifting, and the powerlifters that I knew were generally, pretty big guys. And I liked what I read about Louis, so I went over there to get a bigger upper body, and I really liked competing. Unfortunately, I did one contest. I did a competition in Toledo, which I won. But I was probably only there a couple years. I started having some elbow problems. We were moving the bar down on my back because when I came there, I squatted with a real high bar, almost with a vertical spine. And then we started moving the bar down my back and my elbows and my wrists out, and it was literally destroying my elbows. So I kind of got away from it, and I just never came back. But my elbows is really why I stopped going there. So that's actually how I met Dave.
I reached out to John years later because I was crazy busy with the stuff that I was doing. I'd went through, the dieting with Justin, and I worked with Shelby for a little bit. And it wasn't so much about the dieting, it's just training-wise. I saw an article that he wrote. Hell, it may have even been for our site. But I read some of it, and I really liked what he was saying because I don't want to say it resembled Westside, but there were things in there that made a lot of sense. Train the hamstrings before you squat. It's like, okay, I used to do glute ham raises before I squatted. It made a big difference. So I reached out to him and basically hired him. Like, this was before he had the programs that he's putting out now. They used to be old school programs, that he would send. And I did not want to have to think about my training, but I didn't want to give my training, because even with Justin and Shelby and everybody else, I took care of my training. So giving my training over to somebody else was a huge leap of faith. And I didn't want to do that to somebody who I didn't at least have remembered training with or agree with the philosophy with. And called and talked to him and said, let's do this. And so he started writing the training. And he understood the importance that I was going to have to modify things, so other people, I'm sure if I would have contacted, would have been like a little weird about that kind of shit. But, and then he started coming out on a Saturday to train. I think one leg workout or whatever it was. We have the same training philosophy of just, if we're going to be in there, just fucking destroy it. And it was kind of like a clash of titans that just kind of correspond, worked really well. Because the training intensity was through the roof, which I've always loved that. I've always kind of done that. He's always kind of done that. And then you put it together. And then for me, I find out, his backstory a little bit more. And that he wanted the pro card. And I'm like, I want to be a part of this journey somehow. Like, how can I be a part of this? Because this is cool. This is really kind of what bodybuilding is about. It's what powerlifting is about. It's not an underdog story. It's just, I know what it's like to try so hard to get something and miss, and then try and miss and try and miss. And while I'm not going to say I live vicariously through anybody, it was just really cool to be a part of that journey and seeing it happen. And from that, we developed a friendship. But also from that, he really pissed me off when he didn't retire, which after turning pro. But as I said it once before, I understand why. I understand the mentality behind that. But I still don't like that. But it worked out okay.
What was the most memorable training session you guys had? Obviously, the Baconator one.
There's a lot. Well, the first thing that always comes to my mind, and I don't even know if it was really the hardest training session, but we had a cooler that we had full of ice packs.
Yep.
So we knew going in that we need to have an ice pack to put on behind our necks,
between sets,
on our wrist, on all our heat, spots between sets. So we would be able to make it through the training.
So we didn't have a stroke and die.
So we didn't die.
Yeah.
And so it was like, we knew that there was a possibility that this could actually kill us.
Yeah.
So we
Probably didn't tell your wives that.
brought ice packs out with a cooler to.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of other ones that, there was one of them's on YouTube somewhere where I did a challenge set of deadlifts with the chains, and
Yeah.
I passed out. He just like stepped over me and just started taking the weight off. That's how normal this was. It was just, okay, he's done. Let's just do the next set.
Yeah.
And
I remember smelling that puke.
Oh yeah. And it was the hard part for me was I had to go from training. I call it training economy, doing the least amount I absolutely needed to do to elicit the highest response, to matching his training volume in the shortest time possible, which for me, that was hell. So the first month was hard. It was hell because the breathing was hard. The rest period was, I had a lot of adaptations to make that went beyond just regular muscle adaptations. It's like, this shit is moving quick. It's moving fast. Somehow or another, I still got to keep an eye on my lifters who are in there training, but still not die, and be able to breathe. But that came fast. That came pretty quick because the volume didn't really, because the volume was moderately high when you first started coming out. It's after we got together that it was like, okay, fucker, you think this is enough? Let's try this. And then, well, what if we did this? And these were not just like stupid training sessions. Well, they kind of were, but there were intelligent conversations that led to them, to where we justified the means some way or another. Which
Everything had a reason.
Everything had a reason.
The reason wasn't always good, but everything did have a reason.
It had a reason. Sometimes it was, can we do actually the scariest question, and I think this is to anybody who trains at a super, super hard state, is if you have to ask yourself, can I do this?
Yeah.
That's a troublesome question, because the answer to that's never good, because it's, what the answer, there's only one way to find out.
There's only one way to find out. Yeah, we had that conversation before a lot of sets. Like, can we actually do this?
Is this really?
I don't know, man. There's only one way to find out.
Like, is this really smart? I'm like, I don't know. It's the other thing I remember is I had one leg session that, it was he wasn't there, so it was during the night, and I think I almost killed myself. I actually think I may have had a stroke. But anyhow, him and his training partner and somebody else came out for the next session, and I'm explaining this, and I was explicitly told to never train my legs again by myself. So
who told you that?
He did. It was a hard rule.
Yeah.
And it was not a joke. It was like this, because it's worse at that time, and it's probably was the same for him. It's worse if you didn't have any regulation.
Right.
You had nobody else to guide yourself off of. Like, oh my God, he's about ready to die, so I got to be about close to that. If you don't have that, you just keep going.
Yeah.
And then it's not good because you never think you did enough. And
different mentality. Like, I'm not saying it's the best mentality, but I don't regret it. I don't think if we pushed that hard, I don't think I ever would have progressed the way I did.
Well, here's the justification of it is, during that time frame, it was over a few years, 2-3 years, many visitors came to visit you, clients of yours, friends of yours, almost all pro bodybuilders.
Yeah.
Almost all threw up or couldn't make it through the workout.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're not talking amateurs that were just coming out, and
these
were the best of the best, and they weren't able to hang with what was a normal. And sometimes we took it down because we didn't know, because we didn't want to. Some of them were prep, they were not that far out.
Yeah,
you didn't want to see them get hurt, so it's like, well, we need to dial it back. And I'm like, fuck that, dial it back, shit. But we had to, know. Now, given any of them had they stayed for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I think we would have been fucked.
Yeah, probably.
Because some of them were a lot stronger.
Yeah, we had some beasts coming through,
fucking
man.
Anton and
Ken and Antoine. We had some beasts coming through.
Strong. Well, what else you got?
So about a year or two, we did a video with Dave talking about what he's learned from training with you, John. If there's if you want to elaborate maybe on what you've learned training with Dave.
Sure.
In the however many years it's been now.
Yeah, well, I've always said, first of all, that a lot of the band and chain stuff, the ideas I have, I really feel like I'm the one that brought that to bodybuilding, but I learned that from Westside and I learned that from Dave. Those things turned out to be tremendous tools for me. The other thing is I always considered myself a pretty creative guy with exercises and doing things like that. There's a number of things that Dave showed me that were creative as well. So I feel like I had the advantage of a really creative mind. And, the other thing I would say is, I always wondered through the years what my limits actually were. And even when I was training when I was 20 years old, a guy named Mike Matson, who Dave knows as well, Mike put me through some hellacious workouts. But through the years, I've always wondered, what am I really capable of? And one of the best things for me training out here was Dave kind of asked that same question. It's, what are you really capable of? What am I capable of? What are we capable of together? And if I had to think of one, if I had to narrow it down, Dave's taught me a lot of cool stuff over the years. But if I had to narrow it down to the thing I appreciate the most, it's pushing yourself to the brink, man. It's what are you really capable of? And I don't know if people really realize how rare that is. I think people now I don't want to turn this into something negative, but I think a lot of people look for the easy way out. What is the least amount we can do? How can we make this easier? That thought process didn't exist here. Is how can we make things harder? How can we push more? How can we do more? And I appreciate that probably the most about training with Dave, because that stuff it's life-changing. And that's, to me, is why I got a pro card. It wasn't because I figured out a magical way to eat or I discovered a new drug. I still ate the same. I still took the same stuff. None of that ever changed. But when I came out here, it was the training at even another level that made the difference for me.
All right.
Hold off on that, because I got a side there as well from this that he may or may not know. Is when he first started coming, as I said, I was paying him for his services. I don't think a lot of people know this, so, and that was the respect for the services that he was providing. After a while, there came a time where their discussion was, you don't need to pay me anymore. And he was helping me with my diet as well. And that's a whole nother podcast all in itself right there, because it was always just 2 more weeks. But that's a whole nother, I don't want to go down that road because this will go on for 5 hours. But when that time came, when it kind of switched, it went from more of like a transactional relationship where we're just busting each other's ass training to, okay, now what can I offer him in return to what he's offering me? Because I did learn a lot from him in regards to how to train a muscle, how to watch the muscles work while they're lifting, especially. And it was so awesome because the guys that you would bring out, and you were always lean, you can see the muscle fibers. Mm-hmm. You can see what's flexing and what's not. You could see on some of the guys, I don't want to mention names, that when they did the rows, it was all rear delts and traps. And then later, injuries start to happen that are because of that. So it was at that point, it's when, you were navigating away from the bank, into trying to do this business online and or consulting and the programming and all that is, how can I help navigate him through this period? Because I've been through it, and it's not as easy as people think it is. It's stressful, and you were able to navigate it a lot better than most because you were financially responsible. So it wasn't like you were going to fall on your ass in 3 months, but you still have all the bullshit, that you had to go through, and needed a sounding board, even if it was just venting or bitching or complaining or how to structure this. And it's a lot of mistakes are made in the first 5-10 years of business, and you know that now more and better than anything.
Yes.
And they're normal, so you need somebody to be able to tell you, it's okay, this fucking stuff up is okay, or maybe this one's not a good idea, and then you listen and you decide and find out maybe it wasn't, or maybe it was, but at least there's some sounding board. So I think that was a role that I was able to provide, that I like to be able to provide, because very few people out there do that. And it was a different, I learned a lot from that as well, because it was a completely different environment, because I saw product, yours is service, which is a completely different thing. I give away service, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's like, oh shit, he sells the service. But so from that standpoint, it was still, a friendship developed out of all this, but there was still, a transactional, that's a terrible word to say to explain it, but I think people get what I'm trying to say. Go on to the next one.
All right. I'm not sure how recently, but John, you've been working with one of our Elite FTS guys, Ben Pollack, and I just was wondering if you could elaborate what it's been like working with this guy.
Yeah, so I just started helping Ben with his diet about 4 weeks ago. He wants to do a classic bodybuilding. We've got some work ahead of us. He's structurally not as pretty as some of the classic guys. He does have a fair amount of muscle. We've got to volumize his muscle. We've got to really look at his training. Ben likes to deadlift a lot. I'd like to see him get wider lats so he has more of like a taper for bodybuilding. So it's a different mindset. Ben's got an open mind. He's extremely intelligent. So with Ben, I will give him instructions on what to do, and he oftentimes says, well, why would I do this? And he's just generally wants to learn. He's got a very curious mind, so I can say, well, this is why we would do this. And he'll go, oh, okay. So far, we're 4 weeks in. Ben's doing great. We just did his first calorie drop this past week, a couple days ago. Actually, he's the first one we've done. He's very, very lean already at 9 weeks out. But it's been fun. I hope that he just continues to have an open mind, and he wants to be the strongest classic bodybuilder. He kind of wants to have that title. It's a goal of his, and I see no reason why that won't happen. So, yeah, it's been pretty cool, man.
Okay. John, this is for you as well. Which bodybuilders, if any, would you say played the biggest role in influencing how you train? You said Dave was an influence, obviously, but as far as bodybuilders go?
Yeah, I would say Tom Platz. And the thing I liked about Tom Platz, it wasn't like his technique or form or even necessarily his exercise selection. I like what he brought to the table mentally. He was able to work through pain better than anybody I had ever seen. And I kind of identified with him on genetics. I kind of felt like we had similar genetics. And he had a very thoughtful approach. Like the things that he did, they were crazy, but he had a reason though. And that's kind of like when I think about how Dave and I trained, like a lot of that stuff was crazy, but there was a reason. So he was really the only guy that I really emulated, but it was the mindset. It was how far can you take a set? Really, I would say just him. He was one of the only guys that really influenced me to any degree, but he did influence me a lot early on, a lot, for sure.
Okay. John, can you please elaborate training the last week before a show, or maybe even the last 2 weeks, and what body parts or volume do you train? I'm sure that's individualized, but kind of your protocol to approaching that?
Yeah, so it changed over the years. There's a lot of beliefs in bodybuilding that turned out to not be true for me. I'll give you some examples that your audience might find interesting. We've always been taught to not train our legs the last week or two because the separation would disappear from inflammation. But what Dave and I found was that my legs often looked harder 2 days after I trained them. So we just said, screw this thought that we need to stop training them a week or two out. So I'd hit them on Wednesday and compete Saturday, and my legs would look fantastic. So that was a completely different approach than the norm. The other thing that I started doing later on was I started training, doing just a little bit of a pump volume type workout the day before a show. And the reason why I did that was because I often had to make a weight class when I did the 212 class, which was brutal coming down. So in order for me to try to get nutrients back in my body as fast as possible, specifically to get glucose into the muscles, I found that training a little bit while consuming the Intra stuff would be about the fastest way I could do that outside of doing like lactate ringers, would be the way to do that. So I would use an Intra drink the day before a show after I weighed in and just train the muscle, not to destroy it, but just to deliver nutrients in the muscle to try to fill out the muscle. That was a little different approach too that not very many people, if anybody, used. And
I know a lot of power lifters that will actually do something similar to that before, if they got to cut weight.
Yeah, you got to get all that.
To be able to get the glycogen back in.
Well, I remember the one meet that I did in Toledo, where we were at, where we went straight to the buffet after weigh-in.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a Golden Corral, and then I remember the Butte.
Yeah, the Butte.
The water load or the water retention.
The Butte.
But so that approach was a little different, and I've had a lot of people do that. Josh Wade does that.
Butte?
No.
I'm like, what the fuck?
How does he stay so dry?
Yeah, there's no way.
That's a dead lie. No, the train the night before.
Okay.
I wouldn't even know where to get Butte now, but you're making me want to kind of try it. Just
no.
That was fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, so but training itself, man, you just think of it this way. You just don't want to go out on stage with your muscle beat up and torn down. So you got to like lighten up a little bit the last week. The work is done. The muscle should look fresh. It should be full of glycogen. So think about it that way.
How was your exit from the business world? How did that affect your training and lifestyle? I think you kind of touched upon that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so when I left the bank, I gave a 30-day notice. And if you know anything about banking, the day you resign, they walk you out the door. They just don't want you to have access to information and things like that. Well, I worked the entire 30 days. I remember my birthday was on April 11th on a Wednesday, and I remember thinking, they'll let me go early for my birthday. I worked till Friday, April 13th at 5 o'clock. So I had a tremendous relationship with the people at the bank. I still talk to many of the people, so it wasn't bad. The weird thing for me was the following Monday when I woke up and I didn't have anywhere to go, because for years I had to be somewhere, and then all of a sudden I didn't have anywhere to be, and it was culture shock. I literally felt unemployed. It was the weirdest feeling in the world. So it took me a long time to adjust to that feeling.
Okay. John, and Dave can answer this too, but if you were, I know you're into the WWE and things like that a lot. If you were a WWE wrestler, what would your finishing move be? The chair shot videos are awesome.
Dave's going to get one whether he wants to or not. Finishing move, man. I like something off the top rope, man. You know, something where you're jumping off of something really high and landing on somebody would probably be my finishing move.
I've never followed it to be able to say, so
no.
I can't. I don't have an answer for that one.
Okay. Let me see what we got.
I would come off of I would put somebody on a table, down under, not on the mat, but beside the mat, and I would come off the top rope and smash them through the table. Would probably be what I would do. And I'm more than willing to try it if there's any volunteers out there.
Okay. You guys were talking about the way that sugar affects the body and nutrition and sleep and things like that. Just curious to your opinion, John, on diet soda, things like that. Moderation.
I don't think if anybody drinks a Diet Coke every day, they're going to have some kind of massive problem. You do have to be careful. Like some people are sensitive to, like, say, aspartame. They'll get headaches. Well, that probably is your body telling you, I don't want any of this. Some people will tell you a teaspoon of Splenda is going to erode your gut bacteria completely. Just use common sense. Like when I was dieting, I'd have a Diet Sunkist every once in a while. Every once in a while, I'd have a Diet Cherry 7-Up. But I don't drink 12 of them a day. So I don't have a problem with that kind of stuff. Just moderation is where I stand.
Okay. This one just came in the live chat. It said, question for John. Who do you think would win the Olympia? Dorian in his prime or Ronnie in his prime, ignoring all other factors?
Well, Ronnie in his prime would win. He just has Dorian's best thing was his phenomenal back, but Ronnie had an even better back. And Ronnie had a much better physique from the front, and actually much better from the side. Particularly from the side. If you look at the detail on the side of his body and the side chest, for example, there's really no comparison. My personal favorite physique ever to hit the stage was probably the 93 Flex Wheeler, where he was maybe 218, 220 pounds. Remember when he won the 93 Arnold Classic? You could see every muscle fiber in his body. Everything was attached perfectly. Like, for me, that was the best body that ever walked out on stage.
People should, if they're bodybuilding fans, they should look up photos, see, just do an image search of that, because that's probably the best look I've ever seen any bodybuilder ever.
It's amazing.
It's freaking amazing.
Okay. This is another one from the live chat. They said, I see you both like the Sissy squat machine. What do you guys like about that? Or why do you guys throw that in? We recently did that with Juji Mufu.
Well, I like it because you can get some rectus femoris engagement. When you stand up, you can lean back and you can actually feel a burn localized in your rectus femoris. You will never feel that on any kind of hip flexion or squatting type movement. You will never feel that. The tension goes more into your vastus lateralis, vastus medialis. If you go deep enough, your adductor magnus. But to really feel something drill in to the rectus femoris, that is one of the best ways to feel it. And you'll know it when you do it right, because it's a really unique kind of burn.
I like it for powerlifters because it gives them and teaches them the confidence to be able to sit back at a perpendicular knee angle, which I'm not saying is always necessary for how a lot of people squat, but if you really want to squat and bring in your hamstrings as much as possible, the only way you can really do that correctly is, to jam your shins against the pad as hard as you can and to sit back a lot. I used it when he was out here because my whole goal was just I had one exercise or one superset. He was just out here and his thing was to train every muscle from head to toe in one session. All right. It's a Juji thing. You know how he is. I'm like, well, shit, I got one superset I can do of basically one set of each. So I had to fall back onto HIIT training principles. Like, how can I destroy him without having to do leg presses and something that's going to take a whole lot of time the fastest way I possibly can? So it was a drop set of leg extensions. And I'm like, if I can, because you can always leg extension somebody to the point they can't walk.
Yeah.
And then there's enough machines to basically hobble right over there
to the next one,
to the Sissy squat, bench, and stick him on there. And the worst thing that could happen is him go down and not come up.
Yeah.
So he couldn't get hurt.
Right.
So, and I figured, he would have enough time to get there. So I just used it to be able to destroy him even worse. I think it's a good movement. I don't think it's a be-all, end-all movement. I do like what John said. You can really get up there high if you really focus, and it can also teach somebody to really drive through with their hips at the top if they really focus. But you can cheat really easy on it too, by not leaning back.
By not leaning back, just stand up straight.
And sitting forward. And so that's almost one that you got to be supervised on, at least to be shown how to do it, because it's almost like teaching a really weak teenager how to do a push-up. They'll still get 20 of them done, but their belly may never leave the floor.
Yeah.
But you do it right, it's friggin' hard.
Yeah.
And it's relatively safe on your knees because you're getting way back in there. So it's not a hard one.
All right, here's a good one to end on here, unless you guys have anything else you want to cover. John, what advice do you have for younger lifters coming up? We talked about longevity and stuff like that. And then kind of what is the legacy you want to leave behind? You know, you got your pro card, but obviously you're doing quite a bit these days. So what did you want to leave behind, and what can people expect from you moving forward?
Well, when I think legacy, man, I think the first thing I think of is what I want my kids to hear about me. I want people to be able to tell my kids that I was helpful, that I helped a lot of people, that I made a difference. That's more important to me than any kind of legacy on competing in pro shows. And I don't really have any kind of legacy I think I've really left there, other than the fact that I never gave up, and I eventually did get a pro card, and I did place in 5 pro shows. But for me, the legacy is all about what people think of me when I'm going, and what they tell my kids. More specifically, what they tell my kids and my friends, like the people close to me. I would just want them to think I'm a good person first and foremost. There's a kind of a shortage of good people in the industry, and I hope that my kids will hear good things about me when I'm not around. And what was the other question? Oh, yeah, advice for younger people?
Yeah, advice for younger people.
Well, I have a lot of advice for younger people. I think I'll start with the way things are nowadays. Just try to not get so wrapped up in social media. Try to, first and foremost, try to think about social connections, how you connect with other people before you think about social media. That's a lifestyle piece of advice. It's not a training piece of advice. But where I see the world going now is less social connection. And I think less social connection equals less positivity, less happiness, more depression. You know, there's things like that I think are far more important than training. I always tell the story that one of the things I like most about traveling is when I go to the airport and, like, let's say I'm waiting for somebody to pick me up, and let's say there's a group of people sitting out there waiting for somebody to pick them up. Car pulls up, somebody gets out of the car, they give each other a hug, you can see the connection, and, you know, they get in the car and they drive off. That's a human connection that when I see that, it just makes me feel good. Like, man, that's awesome. And I just wish people would live their lives more like for those social connections with people around them, as opposed to social media. Social media is a great tool for our businesses. I'm not downplaying it for that, but that's not where you should get your personal satisfaction from. That should come from real people, real relationships. And then on the training side, I would just say you're going to have a lot of people telling you that it's easy to overtrain and not train hard and all this stuff. And I really think at the end of the day that intensity is probably the most important factor. Quality reps are what matter the most. You could do low quality reps all day long if you want, the highest volumes you can possibly hit. But if the intensity is not there, you're just really going to spin your wheels. And I'd like to see people kind of going back to the days where you just kind of unleashed in the gym, and then you'll find your way. You'll find what's too much, what's not enough. You'll figure that out. But most people never really even get to the point where they even have to make that decision. They never really cross the, I have a saying, you never know where the line is until you cross it a little. A lot of people will never really cross the line. And I would say, like Dave and I crossed that line many times. We lived on that line. Like, that line was, if we didn't get to that line, we left the gym thinking, shit, So I would say, man, try to get that kind of mentality in your head.
Okay. And then what can people kind of expect from you moving forward? You got your YouTube channel and Granite supplements and whatnot.
More of the same. I'm still trying to place a lot of value on social connections and my family and doing stuff with my kids. Still creating training programs. I love to think through training programs. I think I've created over 30 of them now, and I think probably I sell 15 or 20 of them. I'm continually working on content on my website. I just I'm started uploading the content from the seminar I did in England. Dave's been with me from the start on that. I'm in my 9th year now on the member website. So that's 9 years worth of information on there. But just more of the same. You know, I don't really have any new businesses I'm getting into. I'm just trying to do a better job with the ones that I have. I've learned some hard lessons in the supplement business, just to be 100% forthright. Dave warned me about some of them, and I was a little stubborn, and I made some poor decisions. So I'm trying to be better at that business, and I'm still training hard, man. Like the last 2 weeks in particular, I've trained really hard, so I don't see that changing. So I would say more of the same, really.
Okay, and you know what? One last question for you. For somebody that's newer to what Elite FTS does, what's one reason why people should check out what Elite FTS is doing, in your opinion and experience?
Well, my opinion is that there's nobody as good as what they do, but it's a little bit more personal than that for me. For me, I see a company run by somebody who cares about customers as much as anybody that I've ever seen in my entire life. I've seen a company that promotes values of passing on. I don't see that in any other companies. I've seen the company here that promotes leadership and all those kinds of things. I don't see any other companies that live it. People talk about it. But what it comes down to is if you're going to who you're going to support. And for me, I'm going to support people who have tremendous core values, that they don't just talk about it, they actually live it. And that's been demonstrated for a long time with all the seminars and giving back and things like that. And if you look at a lot of the really popular people now that are out there that came from here, this is where they learned. And then if you want to really look at the equipment, there's literally no better equipment. So you can look at it like if you walk into a restaurant, you want to have the best service from good people, and you want good food. So you have the best equipment and you have the best people here with the best values. So that's a pretty compelling argument to do business with Elite FTS, and that's how I view them.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot. It was a pleasure having you on.
You bet.
Yeah, thanks for being on. We will get you back again.
Thanks for having me.